Chapter 1261. Great Sage Green Melon suddenly felt his hair stand on end, and his heart began to pound. It was as if an unknown danger was about to befall him. The only one who could threaten him now was Zhang Yan. Unspecified currency, it looked at Zhang Yan, and then stared at the shadow of the devil behind him. It had a premonition that if it waited for it to completely solidify, it would be able to kill it. Even the 9 Deaths divine art would be useless. If it wanted to protect itself, it had to find a way to stop it before that happened. He raised his head and let out a cry. The spirit crown on his head shone brightly, producing a 7-colored cloud that descended forward. As soon as the cloud appeared, the demon bird's aura seemed a bit weaker, and the spirit in its eyes seemed to have lost its color. It was clear that using this technique consumed its essence energy. At this moment, the land began to tremble slightly. The Whale King below had also sensed the impending danger, and was feeling a bit uneasy. This divine art was called Pariah, and was a divine art that Great Sage Green Melon had obtained just now after completing his 12 pairs of wings. If even a little bit of it touched the body, even if it was someone with similar magic power, they would have their flesh, blood, essence, and life ended. Zhang Yan had not formed his devil idol in one go, but it wasn't that he couldn't move, it was just that he couldn't use any other divine arts. He flicked his sleeve, sweeping up all of the ancient demon corpses on the ground and tossing them into the cloud. Immediately, they disappeared. He was very experienced in fights of magical powers, so he could immediately tell that this divine ability was only targeted at the body of flesh and blood. Especially for those with rich blood qi, it would be easier for them to attract the 7-colored clouds. With a thought, he found a way to break it. He flicked his finger, and a drop of essence blood flew out in another direction. At the same time, he retracted the blood qi in his body. In the mountain and sea realm, whether it was mystic cultivators or demons, most relied on their blood qi to stir up spiritual energy. If they didn't use their blood qi, then their strength would be reduced by more than half. Even if they managed to dodge this divine art, they would still die. However, Zhang Yan relied on his own magic power to activate divine arts, so he didn't have to worry about that. As expected, attracted by the blood qi, the rainbow cloud immediately abandoned its master and chased after the blood essence. Great Sage Green Melon was stunned. He'd never imagined that the divine ability he'd executed at all costs would be so easily dealt with. Not to mention the fact that he would have to pay an even greater price to activate this divine ability. Even if he were to use it again, his opponent would most likely use the same method to evade it. Its eyes sharpened. Since this divine ability didn't work, he would just have to use another divine ability. But before it could make a move, it saw a palm slap down from above. This palm didn't have any changes at first, but when it landed, it became bigger and bigger. Before long, the entire concealed white mountain was covered. There was no room for escape at all. With a rumble, it was ruthlessly slapped to the ground. From the outside to the inside, he was crushed into a pile of flesh and blood. In the next moment, the 9 Deaths technique was activated. In an instant, it became as good as new and spread its wings to fly again. Because he was afraid that he would be suppressed again, he immediately used a secondary blood technique. In a flash, he transformed into 6 bodies, each flying in different directions and using their respective divine abilities. In just a few breaths, he had used more than 20 divine abilities, and each one was different. Great Sage Green Melon was the leader of the Mieming tribe. Naturally, there were countless benefits. Whenever a direct descendant obtained a divine ability, if he didn't know it before, he could obtain a wisp of blood essence after obtaining it, and he would be able to learn it. For thousands of years, he kept giving birth to descendants because he wanted to obtain more divine abilities. Unfortunately, out of more than 1,000 children, only about 20 of them eventually became ancient demons, and the divine abilities they obtained were only 3 that they didn't have before. If he was given another few thousand years, his strength could increase by another level. But the prerequisite was that he had to defeat the invaders and avoid this calamity. But after a few breaths, he had to give up on this action. Outside Zhang Yan's body, there was a layer of essence aura. No matter what divine ability or dharma technique he used, it was useless. Given enough time, he might be able to break through that layer of protection, but in the short term, it was impossible. There were similar techniques in the mountain and sea realm, except that they consumed chi and blood power. However, divine abilities also relied on chi and blood to circulate energy and were very costly. Therefore, it was much better to just attack. Looking back at the devil god behind Zhang Yan, it was getting clearer and clearer, as if it were coming to life and was about to leap out into the world. With its life on the line, it didn't dare to hold anything back. Otherwise, if the divine ability was unleashed, it might very well die. One of the 6 demonic birds retreated, then summoned all of its chi and blood, craned its neck toward one of the stars in the sky, and let out an unprecedentedly sharp cry. In that instant, the 24th wing that it had just now grew dim, as if it were about to fade away. At the same time, the other 5 demonic birds exploded into clouds of blood mist. This technique was called star sacrifice, and was one of the pre-celestial divine abilities of the sun-extinguishing bird. The demons and devils of the mountain and sea realm were formed from impure chi, but they were also nourished by the power of the stars. Different demons and stars corresponded to different heavenly stars, and if you were powerful enough, you could sense them and then pay a certain price to borrow their power. Great Sage Green Melon had sacrificed more than half of his vital essence to connect with the sun-extinguishing demon star up in the sky. For the next hour, the power of his divine abilities would increase exponentially. It squeezed out its own blood energy from its 5 viscera and 6 bowels, doing its best to circulate its supernatural power. Then, with a vicious roar, the long tail behind it swung, stirring up a colorful mist and dazzling star fragments, creating a colorful rainbow that shrouded the front. Zhang Yan's eyes flickered. Although Great Sage Green Melon's attack was powerful, he could tell that it wasn't all he had up his sleeve. If he tried to block it head-on, then it would unleash an endless stream of attacks. If he tried to retreat, then he would be forced to disperse the devil idol. However, that wasn't impossible. The simplest way was to not defend at all, and instead, attack and force him to stop. Unfortunately, the demonic bird was one step too late. With a thought, the devil idol behind him opened its eyes, then lifted its head up and exhaled a mouthful of fiendish smoke, which melted away the streak of light. Within the space of a few breaths, it was completely gone. Great Sage Green Melon couldn't help but be terrified. He could sense that the devil idol had become very clear, so clear that it was imprinted in his mind. However, when he looked at it, it was blurry, and he couldn't even tell how many hands and feet it had. After exhaling, the devil idol looked back at Great Sage Green Melon, and then took a deep breath. Great Sage Green Melon's head immediately felt dizzy. He was also knowledgeable, and he was shocked. Oh no, this can hurt my spirit. Originally, he had the protection of his blood chi, an indestructible physical body, and layers of protection on his spirit. As long as he didn't jump out of his body, he would be able to block the invasion of external forces. Even if his physical body was destroyed, it would be embedded in every speck of dust and couldn't be destroyed. However, this breath seemed to be pulling him out. He roared angrily, and his blood chi surged as he desperately strengthened his body. He wanted to protect his spirit, but among the hundreds of magical powers he had, none of them were of any use at this moment. Zhang Yan was expressionless, but he continued to activate his magic power. Even the Whale King, who had transformed into a land, was begging for mercy. After a moment of stalemate, Great Sage Green Melon finally couldn't take it anymore. With a rumble, he fell heavily, and an illusory figure that looked like him flew out of his body. It fell directly into the mouth of the devil idol, chewed a few times, and was swallowed. However, after doing this, the devil idol refused to dissipate. Instead, it sent out wisps of consciousness, as if urging Zhang Yan to devour more spirits. Zhang Yan's expression was the same as usual. He did not comply with its will. He retracted his mana, and the devil-subduing slip that was hidden between his brows let out a clear cry. The image of the fiend god trembled and slowly dissipated. He revealed a look of contemplation. The situation just now was not because the fiend god had developed its own consciousness, but because it had triggered that strand of murderous intent, which was then reflected in his mind. If he could not suppress it, it was possible that he could turn the tables. However, he could feel that there seemed to be more mysteries hidden in this magical power, and he could find a way to dig deeper. If he used it well, he might be able to increase his combat power. At this moment, the whole world lit up and the sun and moon shone again. Everyone looked up and saw Zhang Yan standing in the sky, and below him, the corpse of a demonic bird that almost covered the whole Tsang mountain was lying on the ground. Although its body was still there, its spirit was dead, and there was no longer any vitality. Gong Ziyu was dazed, and he said in disbelief, "Great Sage Green Melon is dead just like that?" Gong Zizao looked at Great Sage Green Melon's corpse, shook his head, and sighed. The exterminating demonic bird has been in the northern cold abyss for more than 10,000 years, but I didn't think that it would be destroyed today, and no longer exist. He looked at Zhang Yan's back, and then looked at the many enlightened masters floating in the sky. He understood that after this battle, no demons above the northern cold abyss could fight against these cultivators from beyond the heavens. Just as Zhang Yan was about to descend, a gentle female voice was heard, and she asked carefully, "If Shangjin has eliminated the Ming clan, how will you treat my people?" Zhang Yan looked down, and he knew that this voice was from the Whale King who was trapped here. He thought for a moment, and replied, "If you are willing to serve the cultivators of the 9 continents, you can stay. If not, I can remove your shackles and let you go." After a while, the female voice was heard again, "Even if my Cloudy Cloud tribe goes to other places, we can't guarantee that we won't be captured by the great demons and become laborers. If Shangjin has killed Yu Qingyan, it can be considered as saving us from the abyss of suffering. If you are willing to treat my people well in the future and not order us around, my tribe is willing to serve you." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "I can make the decision on this matter. When my sect master returns, he can make an oath with your tribe." He looked up into the sky and released his spirit. He exchanged a few words with the sect masters of the Qin and Yu factions, who were still gathering spiritual vigor from the pure purple spiritual vigor. After a while, he collected his spirit, and with a flick of his sleeve, he had already broken through the void in one step, and came to stand on the back of the black tortoise. He looked at the true masters in the sect, and said in a loud voice, "Dear true masters, the exterminating Ming clan is dead. From today onwards, the cold Jade Ocean continent will be the foundation of our Qinsong school." Chapter 1262. After the battle between Zhang Yan and Great Sage Qing Pai, the mountains of the cold Jade continent had collapsed, and the shockwaves had caused the islands to sink. The demonic blood and flesh of the Mieming bird that was reared in the lake and the sea had all perished in this battle. Other than the Cloud Whale King's earth form, there was only the raging waves of the sea. As for the Mieming tribe's ancestral mountain, Mount Bai, more than half of it had collapsed. Only the cave where the demon corpses were placed was undamaged because they had been soaked in blood and spirits for years. Zhang Yan was walking through the passage, trying to figure out the background of the creatures in this world from the demon corpses that the Mieming tribe had captured over the past tens of thousands of years. At this moment, he saw a monster with a single horn on its head and a carp tail on its back, resembling both a dragon and a mantis. He asked Gong Shizao, who was following beside him, "What is this?" Gong Shizao thought for a moment and said, "If I'm not mistaken, this is a Chi-Chi. Legend has it that it is the descendant of a dragon and a divine ray. When the water rises, it can fly, and when the water sinks, it can disappear. It is quite powerful." Zhang Yan asked, "Oh, there are true dragons in this world?" Gong Shizao said, "There are many flood dragons in the vast ocean outside the eastern wastelands. Their numbers are not small, but they fight with the aquatic demons all year round, so they rarely come here. As for true dragons, there were pictures of them in ancient times, and there were many rumors about them, but no one has ever seen them." Zhang Yan nodded. If it was a true dragon, then it was not simple. For example, Ji Wuwang of the 9 prefectures was a true dragon. However, the mountain and sea realm was boundless. Even if he encountered a more powerful creature in the future, he would not be surprised, much less a true dragon. At this moment he swept his gaze across and saw a monster with a flat body, a small round head, a wide back, and sharp spikes growing from the back of its tail. He asked, "What is this?" Gong Shizeo looked at it for a while, then shook his head and said, "I'm sorry, I don't know." A gentle voice came from outside. "This is not a creature of this world." Gong Shizeo looked over and saw a beautiful woman walk in. Her skin was like snow, and her clothes looked like they were woven from clouds. It kept on changing and dispersing, making him seem ethereal and indistinct. Gong Shizeo revealed a shocked expression. He could feel that this woman was a different species, even though her divine arts had not reached that level. However, his blood chi was incredibly dense and vast. It was unknown how many times stronger it was. All the demons and devils in this place had been wiped out, and no one knew where he had come from. The woman came in front of Zhang Yan, bowed and said, "Yun Zhu greets Shangzhen." Zhang Yan recognized this woman as the manifestation of the Yun Tan Whale King's blood essence. He pointed at her and said, "Yun tribe master just now said that this creature isn't from this world. Do you know its origin?" Yun Zhu said, "This object is called celebration, divine art number 1. It can allow one to forget the pain and sorrow in their heart and die in joy." Back then, it gathered quite a bit of power in the northern heavens' freezing abyss. 4,000 years ago, it was killed by the great sage Qing Ying and made into a blood and qi totem, which was placed here. Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Looks like the cultivators of the 9 continents aren't the only ones who have entered this world." Yun Zhu said, "Your Excellency is right, but for several thousand years, however, for the past few thousand years, outsiders have come here from time to time. There are also several demons like this one, but most of them were killed or chased away by the living beings of this world." At this point, she looked over and said with a hint of reverence, "In these tens of thousands of years, the only ones who could establish a foothold in this world from the outer heavens are you, Shangzhen. It's a pity that my tribe's king died after traveling through the void. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been enslaved by others." Zhang Yan did not find this strange. The mountain and sea realm's gate of heaven and earth was not as sturdy as the 9 continents, and it was also boundless. If there were almighty beings traveling through the void, they might find this place. But from the Whale King's words, it didn't seem to be a living being of this world. He asked, "Where did the Cloud Tan tribe come from?" Yun Zhu said, "The place where my tribe was born is called the Hornflower Boundary. However, after a disaster, dozens of tribes had no choice but to leave under the leadership of the Cloud King to find a place to live. Only then did we come to this boundary. However, the Cloud King's power was weak, so he was imprisoned here by the Ming tribe. The other tribes were scattered all over this world." Only now did Gong Shizeo understand her background. He sighed and said, "My eastern wasteland country once had an alliance with your clan. However, after the collapse of the country, your clansmen all left." Yun Zhu thought for a moment, then said, "That must be the congealing Cloud tribe. At the time, the tribe king was still alive, and they were much more powerful than my tribe. If the Cloud tribe signs an alliance with someone, we will never betray them. I heard that the Eastern Wasteland nation's 2 high priests were appointed to the Beyond the Heavens, and there were fewer offerings, so they went to live elsewhere." Zhang Yan raised his eyebrows and looked at Gong Shizeo. "Appointed to the Beyond the Heavens?" Cold sweat trickled down Gong Shizeo's back. He clasped his hands together and said, "The high priest is truly forgiving. I didn't intentionally hide it from the high priest. It's just that this matter has been passed down by word of mouth, and it's hard to tell if it's true or not. According to the rumors, 2 decrees descended from the heavens. After the 2 high priests received them, they said that they were going to the Beyond the Heavens to be appointed. They didn't mention anything else." Zhang Yan smiled. "This is a secret of your Eastern Wasteland nation. It's only natural that you didn't tell me. You didn't do anything wrong, so why ask for my forgiveness?" Gong Shizeo nodded repeatedly. As the 3 of them walked, they commented on the demons here one by one. After about half a day, they walked out of this place. In front of them, there was a towering, rolling green cloud. Yun Zhu said, "The heavenly clear sky is a natural object in this world. It's rumored that there's a small world in the clear sky. This object can be separated or combined. If the great sage Green Nightmare takes a liking to one of his children, he'll bestow a ball of it to him. Gong Shizeo exclaimed, "This clear sky is so huge. It must be the great sage Green Nightmare's possession." Yunju said, "Exactly. This heavenly clear sky is controlled by the king of the annihilating Ming clan." Gong Shizeo stared at it and thought, there must be something bad inside. Just by looking at the corpses of the demons outside, one could tell that the annihilating Ming clan had killed countless enemies over the tens of thousands of years. They must have gained a lot. In terms of safe storage, there was no place that could compare to this heavenly clear sky. As the three of them got closer, the ball of green cloud emitted a thick layer of blood light. Yunju said, "Heavenly true, this clear sky has been refined by the blood of the demon kings. I'm afraid only the demon king Green Nightmare can enter." Zhang Yan didn't deny it. He studied it for a while. The so-called blood refinement was just to infuse blood and qi into it. While the method was crude, it was still very useful. If someone tried to force their way in, this ball of green cloud would probably dissipate. He thought for a while. The easiest way to open this place was to refine the blood and qi bit by bit. If it was just one person, it would probably take decades to 100 years. However, if it was a formation, 5 or 6 grotto heavens working together would be able to open a gap in a few days. He asked, "Clan leader Zhu, is there still this heavenly clear sky in the cold Jade Ocean continent? Do the other realms still exist?" Yunju said, "There are dozens of others in the cold Jade Ocean continent, but none of them can compare to this clear sky. I once heard the tribe leaders say that there is a heavenly clear sky cloud above the western desolate region. However, it is covered by boundless astral lightning. Even the ancient demon great sages would be smashed into smithereens if they weren't careful. Very few people can go there." Gong Shizeo said excitedly, "I've also heard of this. It is said that every 100 years, the lightning tides will weaken. That is when the opportunity to enter is there." In the eastern wasteland, High Priest Gongdua also went there to explore, but he didn't go very deep. He said that it is not some small world, but a realm that is not inferior to the mountain and sea realm. The mountain and sea realm had never had a name. Every tribe and race had their own names. When he heard Zhang Yan and the others use this name, he followed suit. Hearing this, Zhang Yan's interest was piqued. If there really was such a realm, then he would have to find an opportunity to explore it. At this time, he suddenly sensed a weak aura emerging from the green cloud. His heart trembled, and he used his divine will to sense it. Suddenly, a lotus flower as large as a mountain appeared in front of him, although it looked somewhat dispirited and listless. Before coming here, he had inquired about great sage Qing Ying's past accomplishments. As soon as he saw this lotus flower, he could vaguely guess its origin. However, there must be a reason why this demonic lotus was trapped here. Since the blood qi in the green cloud had not been resolved, there was no need to be anxious to figure it out. He could deal with it later. After making up his mind, he and the other two retreated from the way they had come. When they were outside, he asked, "Fellow Taoist Gongxi, what do you plan to do after coming down?" Gongxi Zhao said, "Master Zhao and I have troubled you for a long time. Now, we have to find a way to get to the eastern wastelands and report this matter to the king. After that, we will discuss the matter of forming an alliance with you." Zhang Yan nodded. "The journey is long, and there are demons and devils everywhere. I will give you a gold spirit cloud raft. It is fast and can protect you on the way." Gongxi Zhao quickly thanked him. At the same time, he relaxed a little. After witnessing the battle prowess of the cultivators of the 9 continents, he knew that even if the 100 nations of the eastern wastelands joined forces, they would not be able to resist them. He was deeply afraid that these outsiders would come back and swallow the other nations. But now, it seemed that they were willing to abide by their previous agreement. At this time, Yunju said, "Grand Palace Master, if you are going to the eastern wastelands, you might as well bring a few of my clansmen with you. That way, it will be convenient for you to come and go. However, you will have to pay tribute." Gongxi Zhao was delighted. This was a good thing that he could not ask for. Although the eastern wastelands was not as prosperous as the God Nation in the past, they could still support a few cloud whales. He immediately agreed and said, "Rest assured, Clan Master Yun. I will take good care of your clansmen and will not mistreat them." Outside the cold Jade Ocean continent, a large tree stood quietly on an island. At this moment, a green fruit on the branch suddenly swelled. The branch could not bear the weight and quickly fell to the ground. The green fruit split into two halves, and Jing Pan Great Sage emerged from within. However, he still looked a little shaken. He looked in the direction of the ocean continent and saw that the heaven patching diagram was still hanging in the sky. He thought to himself, "I wonder how Qing Pai Great Sage is doing. Since this thing is still there, it bodes ill rather than well. If those cultivators know that I came to report, they will definitely try to kill me. I need to find a force that is not weaker than the Ming clan to rely on." Chapter 1263. Great Sage Green Melon had been defeated, and the Ming clan had been exterminated. Cultivators from beyond the heavens had taken over frigid Jade Sea continent. Although the mountain and sea realm was vast, news of it couldn't be kept a secret for long. Soon, it was being spread out by numerous swift birds. Hong, in the southwest of the northern cold abyss, close to the eastern wasteland, the land was cut off and collapsed into an abyss. Every moment, an immeasurable amount of seawater rushed into the abyss. Beneath it, there was a gray mist swirling about. It was like a whirlpool in the sea, and rumbling sounds could be heard from time to time. Above the turbid vortex, beside the broken continent, there was an ink-black floating cliff that hung high in the sky. A bare-chested young man with totem tattoos all over his body was sitting alone on the cliff. His body was muscular and his hair was thick and black. When the light shone on it, it even had a faint luster to it. This person's eyes were black and white, and at this moment he was staring motionlessly at a leaning tree in front of him. The tree was extremely tall, but the tree trunk seemed to have lost its vitality. It had turned grayish-white. On the branch, there was a green leaf that was barely maintaining its vitality. It looked weak, but it was abnormally tough. Even when the wind howled, it was still firmly attached to the tree, unable to be pulled away. After a long time, a cracking sound suddenly resounded, and the branch had actually shattered into countless pieces of ash. When the green leaf was about to float away, the young man stretched out his hand and grabbed it before carefully placing it into a pouch at the side. His eyes revealed a firm expression. "Even though I've been expelled from the tribe and punished to guard the turbid vortex here, so long as I don't give up hope, I'll be able to return one day." At this time, a stream of light suddenly came from the corner of his eye. By the time he reacted, it had already landed on his face. It was a lively and clever little yellow bird, chirping at him. It seemed to be saying something. However, after hearing a few words, the young man revealed a shocked expression. In the end, his expression turned into one of disbelief. He hurriedly took a few breaths to calm himself down before he could not help but ask, "Are you telling the truth? Are you telling the truth?" The little yellow bird chirped at him a few more times, seemingly dissatisfied with the youth's suspicion of it. The young man laughed aloud. He took the leather bag beside him and took out a few fruits. The birds fluttered over and pecked at the fruits. The young man's expression gradually turned serious. At the same time, there was a hint of excitement and agitation. One could even see that his body was trembling. "The clan elder will definitely summon me to ask about such news. That way, I'll have the chance to go back and visit my little sister. I wonder how she's doing now." However, although he was happy, he did not let it get to his head. After waiting for another half a day, 3 messenger birds came one after another, and they all said the same thing. Only then did he truly believe it. These messenger birds were all different species, and they were not in the same territory. No one could tamper with it in such a short time. So he tidied up a little and tied the pouch to his waist. Then he took a deep breath, opened his arms, and jumped into the turbid vortex. The turbid vortex seemed to be right in front of them, but it was actually very far away. An hour later, he was just about to get close. Looking at the vast and powerful vortex, he circulated his chi and blood, and his body suddenly turned incorporeal. It was as if he had become an invisible shadow, and he easily passed through it. Another 2 hours passed. He landed lightly on the surface of the ground, and his body turned corporeal again. The terrain where he was standing was uneven and broken. What entered his eyes were grayish-white rocks, and the ground was covered in coarse gravel. Even if he looked to the end of the horizon, there was no vegetation, nor was there anyone. It was desolate. He showed a determined expression and walked forward. After walking alone for 3 days, he finally reached a stone cave. The ground was filled with dried bones and broken weapons. It was as if there had been a terrible battle many years ago. Sunlight shone through the holes above. Although there were only a few rays, it actually made the place as bright as day. Most of these skeletons were huge. Even if some were lying on the ground, they were still more than 100 feet tall. Most of them had 2 heads, 4 arms, 1 eye, and 3 legs. Others had the lower body of a snake and the upper body of a human, with 2 horns on top of their heads. He treated this as normal. Because he was a little tired, he leaned against a large white bone and carefully took out a few blood pills. He put them in his mouth. Immediately, a fishy smell rushed into his nose, and he couldn't help but want to vomit. But his heart was tough, and he still gritted his teeth and swallowed them. Most of the blood pills in the tribe were fresh and mild, and full of medicinal power. The few pills he had were more impurities, and they were not refined. If they were given to other people of the same generation in the tribe, they would just throw them away. But he still treated them as treasures, and he couldn't bear to use them. After dissolving the medicinal power, his dispirited expression was swept away, and he regained some of his vigor. He walked quickly, leaping over those skeletons. After walking for another 10 days or so, he walked out of the cave along an arch bridge built by the spine. Here he swallowed the last blood pill, and after circulating it, he continued forward. He had only walked 100 feet when a gust of wind suddenly swept over, and he was pulled in. But he didn't panic at all, and relaxed his body, allowing the wind to sweep him. 2 hours later, he was thrown out by the wind, and he landed in a pool with a thud. He quickly used his strength to jump out of the water, and landed on the shore. This place was very different from the outside world. In front of him was a clear lake, and the reeds by the lakeside floated. He could faintly see a flock of white-feathered water birds, either reflecting their shadows on the water or dancing gracefully. It was full of peace and tranquility. When he arrived here, he also made up his mind. He circulated his blood qi and evaporated the water vapor on his body. Then he took out a piece of clothing from his waist pouch, and after putting it on, he came to a pavilion. After bowing to the broken stone tablet in the pavilion, he said, "Yang Yenxing has an important matter to discuss." After waiting for a long time, the figure of a woman appeared on the stone tablet. She said, "Yang Yenxing, you were expelled from the tribe a long time ago. Why did you come here? Aren't you afraid that Qing Junzi will capture you and behead you?" The young man said, "Chun Sipin, although the tribe doesn't allow Yenxing to stay in the earth abyss, they still gave me an errand. Today, I received an important news, and I have to report it to the tribe." The woman was startled, and she immediately sneered, "What important news can there be? Is it the extermination Ming clan, or the Liangzhong clan?" The young man said seriously, "This matter is related to the extermination of the Ming clan, and it might be related to the survival of the Shanyang clan." The woman humphed coldly, "The more you talk about it, the stranger it gets. Even if the 2 clans joined forces, how could they break through the murky Yin barrier outside, and how could they come to the Earth Abyss blessed land? Go back, I'll pretend you never came here today." Before the young man could say anything, the figure on the broken stone tablet had already disappeared, and his eyes were filled with anger. Then he fiercely punched the stone tablet, but there was no reaction from the cold stone tablet. He came here full of hope, but he didn't expect that the other party didn't even believe his words. He was angry and anxious, but his words carried little weight, and he was a sinner. Unless he had the ability to cross the 80,000 miles of water and return to the tribe, he could only use this place to pass the message to the tribe. Just as he was thinking hard of a solution, the broken stone tablet suddenly lit up again, and the woman's figure appeared again. She said unwillingly, "Come in." The stone tablet shook, and a ball of light appeared inside, and it looked like a door. The young man was startled, and although he didn't know what happened, he didn't hesitate and turned his body into a shadow. With a big stride, he rushed into the stone tablet. When he reached the inner room, he discovered that he was standing in a bright and spacious copper hall. Other than the woman, there was a young man standing in front of him, but there was another face behind his head, and it was sometimes smiling, and sometimes it was sad. He knew that this was because his clansmen were full of chi and blood. Because of the heart head, only the members of the Fonli tribe of the upper 6 tribes could obtain this divine ability at such a young age. He bowed according to the tribe's etiquette and said, "My people, greet the Fonli noble." The young man was a little surprised and nodded. "You are quite knowledgeable. Yang Yanxing, I've heard about you, but your little sister is very talented, and the tribe elders have high hopes for her. But our Shanyang tribe is strict, and the people of the lower 36 tribes are not allowed to mix into the upper 6 tribes. She can't have any blemish on her birth, so we can only wrong you. Do you understand?" The young man was silent for a while and said, "I understand." The elder also said something similar. The young man was satisfied. "It's good that you understand. Then, tell me, what's your business here?" The young man knew that he probably wouldn't be able to see his little sister again, and although he was a little disappointed, he still pulled himself together and told the news he received. The young man was very casual at first, but after listening to the news, his expression changed drastically, and the lady beside him was also in disbelief. The young man's face darkened, and he said sternly, "Yang Yanxing, are you sure that what you said is true?" The young man said loudly, "I heard it from the messenger bird, and every word I said is true. I dare not lie, and I dare to swear on the tribe oath as proof." The young man patted his shoulder and said, "Good, follow me." The young man felt dizzy, and suddenly he found himself in a cave. Just when he wanted to look around, he heard a voice saying, "Don't move, we are imprisoned in the secret palace of the elder." The young man heard it, and he stood there respectfully. A while later, the rocks in front of him moved, and a huge face with deep facial features appeared. He looked at the young man, and a bright light shone down on him. The young man felt dizzy, and he fell asleep standing. After a while, the stone face said to the young man, "My people can't stay here for long, take him away." The young man bowed respectfully, put his hand on the young man's shoulder, and the two of them disappeared. After a while, in the lake, above the sky, 2 more faces appeared, and the face on the sky asked, "Elder Chiu, did you see it clearly?" The head of the prison, Daoren, said, "I checked with my heart technique, that lowly person did not lie." The face in the lake said, "A few days ago, I saw the Mieming demon star in the sky dimmed, and it seems that the news is true." The face in the sky asked, "Then where should the Shanyang clan go? Since these cultivators from beyond have joined forces with the countries of East Baron, what should we do if they come to attack us?" Elder Chiu thought for a while and said, "These cultivators from beyond are very strong, and in just half a day, they slaughtered the entire Mieming clan. Since great sage Qing Pai could seize the light of the sun, he should have cultivated the 24 wings, but he is still not a match for these cultivators from beyond the heavens. We have no choice but to not fight against them. Why don't we send our messengers to investigate them?" Chapter 1264. In front of the azure sky, Han Ziyang, Du Yunzhan, Peng Wenin, Lu Junyang, and a few other Qinsong school Taoist Dongtianjinren were sitting in different places, circulating their techniques to dispel the foul qi and blood left behind by the previous demon kings. Among the Mieming demon tribe, only the Luoming demon ancestor from 10,000 years ago was the most powerful, followed by the great sage Qing Ying, who was killed by Zhang Yan not long ago. However, after the latter grew 24 wings, he didn't have the time to refine this item, so he came out to fight. Therefore, the qi and blood mixed in was not much better than the previous demon kings. About 4 to 5 days later, Han Ziyang stood up from the formation and went to where Zhang Yan was sitting. He bowed and said, "Perfected one, the qi and blood have been dispelled." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "Thank you, perfected ones." The few perfected ones bowed. Han Ziyang said, "It's nothing. The frigid Jade Ocean region is the foundation of our Qinsong school. That kind of foul qi can't be left here. Zhang Yan nodded his head and stood up. He walked to the front of the azure sky and stood still under the clouds. He glanced at it and said, "There is something mysterious within the azure sky. The formation outside cannot be withdrawn. I need to personally go and take a look. I need to trouble the few spiritual masters to hold the fort outside." Han Ziyang said seriously, "Don't worry, perfected ones, and I know how dangerous it is. There won't be any mistakes." Zhang Yan nodded slightly and waved his sleeves. Under the gaze of Han Ziyang and the other perfected ones, he stepped into the azure sky. Peng Wanyin saw that Zhang Yan's figure had disappeared in a moment. She frowned and said, "I heard that this azure sky is a small world. The great sage Qing Ying has been managing it for a long time. Could he have done anything inside?" Du Yunzhan said in a deep voice, "Duzhen Hall Master's cultivation is profound. He can even cross the void outside. Even if the azure sky disperses, he can still break through the door and return here." Lu Junyang didn't say anything. He stood quietly at the side and looked at the rolling azure sky. However, there was an indescribable expression on his face. Not long after Zhang Yan entered the blue sky, he was first shrouded by a cloud of fog, but after a few breaths, it dissipated. The scenery inside the room appeared before his eyes. There was actually a vast world here. At this moment, the blue dome of heaven was misty, and there was only a mass of red clouds in the distant sky. It was like the first glimmer of dawn before the sun rose. In the middle of the land, there was a giant lotus that was taller than a mountain. It was exactly the same as what he had seen in his divine will. He was not in a hurry to step forward. Instead, he slowly sized up his surroundings. When a cultivator reached the phantasm realm, they could create their own heavenly grottos because he could tell. This place could indeed be considered as a small world, and it wasn't a cave dwelling that was created through teleportation and illusion techniques. However, there were no traces of divine abilities being moved here, which meant that this world was still in its original state. He deduced that after the demon kings of the exterminating Ming clan obtained this item, they only used it as a storehouse. Thus, in the past 10,000 years, there had been no changes. In truth, the two energies here were split. The 5 elements were all present, and if one could plant the spiritual veins. After such a long time, even if one didn't care about it, one could manage it into a blessed land. If one went one step further and refined the heavenly green sky, one could control its size as one wished. When one was in danger, one could also hide in it and use it to protect one's life. He thought to himself, the exterminating Ming clan is limited by their knowledge. They have a treasure mountain in their hands, but they don't know how to use it. Right at that moment, an old voice came from afar with a hint of disbelief and a hint of surprise. "There is only Yu Qingyan here. This is Yu Qingyan's private vault. Since you are able to enter this place, have you already subdued it?" Zhang Yan didn't reply and looked over. After a while, he asked calmly, "You are Great Saint Crooked Lotus?" A cloud of mist floated out from the lotus and formed into a face. He looked at Zhang Yan and couldn't help but reveal a shocked expression. Different from Gongshi Zhao and the rest, as a plant spirit, the first thing he felt wasn't the soaring vital energy on Zhang Yan's body. Instead, it was the huge aura that spread out in all directions. Every breath he took shook this small world. This wasn't something that Great Saint Qing Ying could compare to. No wonder Yu Qingjin is in such a hurry to absorb the essence in my body. With such a strong enemy, even if he becomes 24 wings and is not far from the Wanming demonic ancestor, he is still weaker than this person. I wonder where this person came from. Could it be that the Eastern Wasteland country has produced another high priest? After thinking for a while, he carefully replied, "I am indeed Crooked Lotus. In front of you, I don't dare to call myself Great Saint." Zhang Yan said, "I heard that you were defeated by Great Saint Qing Ying 1,000 years ago and your whereabouts were unknown. I thought you were long dead, but you were moved here. Great Saint Qing Ying didn't take your life and instead imprisoned you. I think you are of some use to him." Great Sage Crooked Lotus didn't dare to hide anything and answered honestly, "That's true. I was born with supernatural powers and have the ability to accumulate the world's essence. You Qingjin imprisoned me here so that I could be used as a blood medicine at any time. Saying this, he tried to make his tone as humble as possible and probed, I wonder if Great Saint can let this little demon out. If you can, this little demon is willing to serve Great Saint as my master. After being imprisoned for 1,000 years, his arrogance as a demon king had long been polished clean. Now, he only wanted to see the light of day again. The reason he wasn't willing to serve Great Saint Qing was because he knew that whether he was willing or not, Great Saint Qing wouldn't let him out. However, Great Saint Qing wouldn't take his life either. Zhang Yan faintly smiled and didn't answer him. He used his spiritual energy and glanced down. He saw that below the lotus, there were traces of blood qi seeping out. Following it down, he saw that there were countless corpses of demons. He instantly understood and said, You said that you can accumulate spiritual qi. Looks like you weren't lying. Great Saint Crooked Lotus said in a self-mocking tone, I won't hide it from Great Saint Qing. Great Saint Qing sent his clansmen to battle everywhere and buried all the demon corpses in this little demon's roots to replenish his vital energy. However, this wasn't out of kindness. It was just like how humans treat livestock. After they get fat, they will be slaughtered to fill their stomachs. Light flashed in Zhang Yan's eyes and he said, In that case, if you want to strengthen yourself, you need to eat flesh and blood. Great Saint Crooked Lotus hesitated for a moment and said, Great Saint Qing, this little demon has always been clean and pure. I've never eaten humans. Zhang Yan sneered and said, That's natural. The human path countries in the world are far away in the eastern barren land. There are many powerful demons in the northern chilling abyss. With your methods, it's easy for you to capture them. It's not that you view the people of the eastern barren land differently. You just don't want to leave what's near at hand for what's far away. Great Saint Crooked Lotus thought for a moment and said, This little demon is a demon of plants. If Great Saint Qing doesn't like it, I can tolerate not eating flesh and blood. He knew that if Great Saint Qing could kill Great Saint Qing, then Great Saint Qing could also kill him. Although not eating flesh and blood would hinder his cultivation, it would only slow him down a little. As a demon of plants, even if he only absorbed the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, it would be enough to sustain himself. At this moment, Zhang Yan asked again, Demons of plants have always lived for a long time. How long have you lived? Great Saint Crooked Lotus answered honestly, I've lived for more than 18,000 years, but I only gained intelligence about 7,000 years ago. Before that, I was muddle-headed and didn't know myself. Zhang Yan nodded and said, It's been a long time. Let me ask you something. Do you know where the bright light demonic ancestor of the annihilating clan is? Great Saint Crooked Lotus became spirited and said, I happen to know about this. The bright light demonic ancestor tried to break the world and leave, but he didn't succeed. Later on, he went into hibernation and waited for the day when he recovered his strength. As for where he went into hibernation, I heard that it's somewhere in the southwest. But many years have passed, and I don't know if there were any changes. If you can let me out and summon my old subordinates, there's a 90% chance of finding him. However, the demonic ancestor's ability is earth-shattering. Once he wakes up, I'm afraid I won't be able to deal with him. Zhang Yan asked a few more questions in detail, pondered deeply for a moment, and then looked around. When he saw that there was nothing else besides the bloodstones that were piled up into a mountain, he didn't speak any further with Curved Lotus. He turned around, and a rumble resounded as he flew into the sky. Great Saint Crooked Lotus couldn't help but be shocked. He clearly saw that Zhang Yan didn't leave through the portal but relied on his physical body to break through the barrier. He thought to himself, it won't be difficult for someone like him to go beyond the heavens. No wonder he's not afraid of the demonic ancestor. At the same time, he was very nervous. Even after Zhang Yan left, he didn't say how he was going to deal with him. He really didn't know what was waiting for him. After Zhang Yan went outside, he ordered Han Ziyang and the others to disperse. At the same time, he asked someone to invite Meng Zhen over. He said, there's a demonic ancestor in the Ming clan called Bright Light. He's the source of the Bright Light demonic bird's bloodline. He's still in this world, in the southwest of the Cold Jade Ocean province. It's only 1,000,000 miles away from here. Mengzhen can send a disciple to check first. Mengzhen said, Your Highness, do you want to get rid of this demon? Zhang Yan said coldly, How can I allow someone to sleep next to my bed? Since I've destroyed the Ming clan, I've already incurred enmity with this demonic ancestor. Instead of waiting for it to wake up and cause trouble for me, I might as well go and kill it first. It was actually the most convenient thing to send the Shaoqing extreme sword cultivators. However, the conquest of the Bright Light tribe was to find a place for the Qinsong school to establish its foundation. The subsequent matters should naturally be handled by the cultivators of the Qinsong school themselves. Mengzhen thought for a moment, then said, It's better to nip trouble in the bud than to nip it in the bud. However, this is a serious matter, so I'll personally make a trip. Zhang Yan nodded and said, With Mengzhen looking for it, the sect can rest assured. At this point, he solemnly said, There's one more thing that the sect leader, Reverend, is very concerned about. Although the Qinsong school has already found a location, the path of cultivation requires external medicine to complement it. The mountain and sea realm and the 9 prefectures are 2 different heavens and earth, and the heavenly materials and earthly treasures are also different. We need to find medicine that can be used as soon as possible. This is of utmost importance. Although I've already sent people out to investigate, it's difficult to find anything in a short time. Mengzhen, please be careful on this trip. Mengzhen cupped his hands and said in a deep voice, Hall Master Duzhen, please reply to the sect leader, Reverend. This is an important matter for the sect, and disciple will definitely keep it in mind. Chapter 1265. Above the cold Jade Sea region, the floating heavenly palace was once again suspended in the middle of the sky. At the same time, several small worlds opened wide, and many floating islands descended from the sky. Dalaref, this time, not only did the Qinsong school move the Black Tortoise and the 9 cities that carried it, but they also brought all the caves and islands in the Great Pool of Dragon Lake. However, the Mountain Gate formation had not been set up yet, so most of the junior disciples were still cultivating in the small worlds and had not entered this world. Further away, mountains rose up, and islands appeared out of thin air. This was the place where many of the Qinsong school's grotto heavens were using their magical powers to move the water and soil, reorganizing the land. The cold Jade Sea region was vast, almost comparable to the original land of the 9 continents. Coupled with the abundance of spiritual vigor, if only based on the number of cultivators in the Qinsong school, almost every one of them could enjoy a large cultivation paradise. However, in the long run, they could not do so. The only way was to divide the inside and outside, the top and the bottom, layer by layer, and make sure that no land could be occupied, so that the rules would not be messed up in the future. In the sky, there was a flash of spiritual light, and a cloud raft descended. Guan Yingyue, Zhou Xian, and the others stood in front of the raft. Beside them, there were 3 others. They were all disciples that Qi Yuntian had accepted after he formed the Grotto Heavens. They were all talented, but their cultivation was not high, and none of them had reached the Yuaning realm. Behind them, there were Zhou Xian and a dozen or so 3rd-generation disciples, and there were more than 20 of them. This time, they were under Qi Yuntian's orders to explore the land, build a restrictive spell altar, and search for treasures and medicines that could be used in this world. At this time, a star pivot flying ship flew up in the distance, and everyone knew that it was the other top 10 disciples of the sect. Their purpose for this trip was the same as theirs, and they even had the intention of competing with each other. Zhou Xian looked and said emotionally, This area is bigger than the previous mountain gate. However, the mountain and sea realm is still a wild land, and there are many dangers. I don't know if we can all return safely. Guan Yingyue said emotionally, As one of the top 10 disciples, we should do something. Although there were demons everywhere outside, and traveling was extremely dangerous, as one of the top 10 disciples. When they enjoyed the benefits of the sect, they had to take responsibility. Furthermore, Qinsong School had always given out rewards based on the number of demons they had killed. Although this trip was dangerous, there were also many opportunities for them to make contributions. Zhou Xian said, Senior Martial Brother is right. Guan Yingyue looked at him and said in a low voice, Senior Martial Brother Zhou, Master isn't here, so there's no need to address me like this. He was now the eldest disciple of Qi Yuntian. Zhou Xian was still Qi Yuntian's disciple in name. Logically speaking, he should call him Junior Brother, but some of his skills were taught by Zhou Xian on behalf of his master, so he always had a trace of respect for him and always called him Senior Brother. Zhou Xian shook his head. With Qi Yuntian around, it didn't matter what he thought. On the surface, he had always been very particular about the difference between the top and the bottom. You can't do this. Our sect's disciples are all here, so how can we mess up the hierarchy? Guan Yingyue sighed and stopped trying to persuade him. Zhou Xianer knew that this was actually a pain in Zhou Xian's heart. The more he mentioned it, the more uncomfortable he felt. This was because her relationship with Guan Yingyue had always been good. Her beautiful eyes turned and she said, Little Uncle Master, there are so many demons and monsters outside. Why don't we set up the mountain guarding formation first? Guan Yingyue said, That makes sense. Right now, among the sects, it's just that our Qinsong school has obtained the land to set up our sect, so it's not convenient for us to immediately set up the boundary. Moreover, the sect master is not here yet, so it's not convenient for him to light up the spirit cave. Therefore, we can only put the matter of the forbidden formation aside for now. Zhou Xianer said worriedly, But what if the demons and monsters take the opportunity to enter? What should we do? Guan Yingyue said, With the perfected ones in the hall, our Qinsong school can stand tall. What is there to be afraid of? Back then, the great underworld grandmasters set up the sect outside the northern underworld province to use the hands of many demons and monsters to hone the younger generation of disciples. In my opinion, this is not a bad thing, but a good thing. It can remind us from time to time that if we want to preserve our lives and seek immortality, we must not slack off. At the end of his words, he looked behind him, his eyes sharp and spirited. Whether it was the 3 fellow disciples or the 3rd-generation disciples behind, they were all shocked, feeling that this sentence was meant for them. Zhou Xian could be accepted as a registered disciple by Qi Yuntian. His perseverance was also far from ordinary people. He agreed with this sentence and nodded. That's right, if we cultivators are not determined, it's very easy to indulge in pleasure. We think that we have a long life and a lot of time to be free and happy. But when we wake up, we regret that we did not work hard to cultivate. There are enemies outside, and it's like hanging axes and swords on top of your head. Whether you like it or not, you can only be forced to move forward with all your strength. He glanced at his disciples and said coldly, If you encounter demons and monsters later, I will not help you. Everything is up to you. When Zhou Xianer and the others heard this, they all solemnly agreed. As they spoke, the cloud raft had already left the inner sea of the frigid jade continent, and its speed gradually increased. At this time, Guan Yingyue produced a movement talisman from his sleeve. With a slight shake, the cloud raft disappeared. When it reappeared, it was already out of the frigid jade continent. The mountains and lands were nowhere to be seen. Zhou Xianer reached out and carried out a young cloud whale. The 10 disciples who had come out to search for precious materials were all accompanied by a cloud whale. Although the whale looked small, it could carry dozens of them back no matter how far they went. Guan Yingyue looked down and saw nothing but a vast, deep sea. The mountain and sea realm is huge, he thought to himself. If I don't have some sort of teleportation technique, it'll take me more than a year to get out of the frigid jade continent. But just relying on the cloud whale isn't a solution. When I get back, I'll definitely ask Master to set up movement talismans everywhere so that it'll be easier for the disciples to go back and forth. In fact, the sect was also considering what he was thinking. It wasn't just because it wasn't easy to travel, but also because the Qinsong school didn't want to entrust such an important matter to the Cloud Whale clan. It was just that now wasn't the right time, so they hadn't done anything yet. Zhou Xian was also looking around. During the attack on the Mieming tribe, he had obtained a landscape map of the frigid North Abyss. It was even more detailed than the one given by the Eastern Wasteland nation. He had already looked it over carefully before coming out. Now that he looked at it against the stars in the sky, he said, "Senior brother, Head south for 60,000 kilometers. There's a continent where the tribe that rules is called Xiaogan. It's a tribe of demons and monsters. Although they submitted to the Mieming tribe thousands of years ago, their population is small and their territory is small. They haven't produced a single demon saint, so they don't pay much attention to it. Would you like to explore this place? Guan Inyue said, the sect's precious medicine can only be used for a few decades. For us cultivators, it can be used in the blink of an eye. It's best to find it as soon as possible. Since this continent is close to the frigid Jade Sea continent, we might as well explore it first. Who knows, we might find something there. Hearing him say this, some of the third-generation disciples behind him were eager to give it a try. There were too many powerful demons in the mountain and sea realm, and most of the time they didn't have a chance to fight. Since the demon tribe wasn't strong, perhaps there was a chance for them to show off their skills. If they made a contribution, they could go to the Virtue Courtyard to exchange for precious materials and medicines. The cloud raft flew south for more than half a day, and was now above the Deer continent. It could be said that this place was small. But compared to the 9 continents, it was at least as big as the Donglai continent. As the dwelling place of a small tribe, it was already vast enough. The Xiaogan tribe sensed the arrival of outsiders, and immediately tens of thousands of tribesmen came out. Their upper bodies were human, but their lower bodies were elk, and they galloped across the plains. Rumbling sounds could be heard, and the sound was not small. At the very front were a man and a woman. The woman was petite and plump, while the man was tall and muscular, and he was covered in rainbow-colored fur. In his hand was a long staff that emitted green smoke, indicating that his position was not ordinary. At this moment, they were all looking up with great vigilance. Guan Inyue took out a beast-subduing collar, threw it out, and released a Ming exterminating bird. This was a bird demon that had been captured on this expedition. Although Zhang Yan had said that he wouldn't take any of them, it didn't prevent him from exchanging them with his disciples. There were also a few that had been offered up by the various sections. Considering that many of the demon tribes around the cold Jade continent had submitted to the Ming exterminating tribe, it would be more convenient for them to have someone from the tribe appear, rather than subdue the Ming tribe themselves. Therefore, they had brought one with them. The bird demon had long since been subdued by the clear feather sect's secret technique. After it came out, it prostrated itself and said respectfully, "This lowly demon pays his respects to the exterminating tribe." Guan Inyue said, "The demons below were originally under the control of the Ming exterminating tribe. Go down and order them to pick over 10,000 strong disciples to come out and listen to my orders." The bird demon agreed without hesitation. It spread its wings and leaped down. Woodcutter had been under the control of the Ming exterminating tribe for thousands of years, and his respect for them had long been etched into his bones. Seeing a Ming exterminating bird descend, he was instantly terrified. Even the man and woman immediately prostrated themselves. They trembled in fear. The bird demon arrived in front of the deer demons and scolded them. The man and woman kept kowtowing, but they didn't look like they dared to disobey. Zhou Xian's gaze was distant as he said, "Although the Ming exterminating tribe has been destroyed, its might hasn't dissipated yet. If we want to turn things around, it won't be something that can be done in a day." Guan Inyue didn't mind. To him, this was only a small matter. He said, "Once my Qinsong school has a stable footing, why should we care about what these demons think?" After a while, the bird demon turned back and said, "Your Excellency, I've already made the necessary arrangements. Woodcutter and the tribe leader have already gone to gather the young and strong. If Your Excellency wants to do anything, you only need to say the word." Guan Inyue waved his hand and ordered the cloud raft to descend slowly. He shook his sleeve, and a small mountain of jade bricks appeared in front of him. He said to the disciples behind him, "There are no perfected ones to look after this place. If we encounter any external enemies, we'll have to defend ourselves. All of you need to set up the restrictive formation altar in the shortest time possible." The disciples all agreed in unison. Although they came out to search for precious materials, they had to take care of their own safety first. Once the altar was set up, as long as it wasn't a demon saint, They didn't need to be afraid no matter how many came. Under the urging of the bird demon, Woodcutter's tribe gathered over 10,000 people from all directions in less than 3 days. With enough manpower, the speed of repairing the altar was much faster. It only took about 60 days for it to be completed. On the day of the altar's completion, Guan Yingyue personally set up the formation flags and instruments. At that moment, the spiritual energy in the mountains, rivers, and veins of the land were all connected to one point and gathered into a ray of spiritual light. In an instant, it soared into the sky and lit up the night sky. It wasn't just him. At that moment, on the various islands outside the cold Jade Ocean continent, the altars were also uprooted from the ground. Rays of spiritual light also soared into the sky and shone brightly in the sky. Chapter 1266. While the Qinsong school was sending its disciples to explore the land and rivers, a delegation from the Shanyang clan was on its way to the Shanyang clan. The person in charge of this mission was the elder of the upper 6 tribes, Zhu Qi, and the deputy was Fan Li Qing of the Fan Li tribe. Yang Yansheng was also in the mission, but he was only a servant. Sending him out to the Shanyang clan was supposed to be a reward, but in fact, it was to banish him further away from the Shanyang clan, so that he would never be able to return. Yang Yansheng had already guessed it, but he was powerless to resist, so he could only endure it silently. The delegation from the Shanyang clan rode on a 2-headed divine ray. Its back alone was more than 10 miles wide, and when it flew, it could emit hundreds of howls of powerful monsters. Not only could it force the monsters to retreat, it could also easily break through the blood qi barrier. Zhu Qi was sitting in the highest palace on the back of the divine ray. Ever since he left the Shanyang clan, he had been trying to find out more about the cultivators of the 9 continents, but the more he learned, the more shocked he became. He thought, the strength of these cultivators from the outer heavens is not limited to what they showed on the surface. He thought for a while and said, "Go and invite the deputy Fan Li here." Not long after, Fan Li Qing came and said respectfully, "Clan elder, do you have something to tell me?" Zhu Qi looked at him and said in a deep voice, "Are the lowly people still safe?" Fan Li Qing said, "Don't worry, clan elder. Yang Yansheng will not be able to return this time, so don't worry about his relationship with his beloved daughter." Zhu Qi nodded and no longer asked about the matter. Instead, he said, "Just now, I received a letter from the Eastern Barren country. According to the information, these cultivators from the outer heavens are here to take over the land." Fan Li Qing was startled, and he said in confusion, "Of course. Otherwise, why would they occupy the Frost Jade Ocean province that destroyed the Ming clan?" Zhu Qi shook his head and said, "Deputy Envoy, there is something you don't know. These cultivators of the 9 continents don't come from just one force, but from the union of several forces. Among them, the 2 most powerful forces are called Dark Blue and Shaoqing. The one occupying the cold Jade Ocean continent is only Qinsong." Fan Li Qing's thoughts moved quickly, and he immediately thought of the crux of the matter. He frowned and said, "In that case, he might go out again to seize territories?" Zhu Qi said solemnly, "Not maybe, but definitely." Fan Li Qing pondered for a moment and asked tentatively, "Clan elder is afraid that they will take a fancy to my Earth Abyss blessed land, but the northern heaven cold abyss is so vast, why would they leave it alone and not occupy it? Instead, you came to find me? You should know that our Shanyang clan is not any weaker than the annihilating Ming clan." Zhu Qi said with a gloomy face, "What if they are not satisfied after occupying the northern heaven cold abyss?" Without waiting for Fan Li Qing to answer, he continued, "At that time, their forces had already grown so much that even if our Shanyang clan wanted to retaliate, we wouldn't be able to." Fan Li Qing asked, "Then, elder, are you planning to drive him out while his footing is unstable?" Zhu Qi revealed a helpless expression and shook his head. "It's easier said than done. I can't even destroy the Ming clan. Furthermore, the upper 6 tribes of our Shanyang clan would never agree to start a war for no reason." Fan Li Qing said, "Then we can only sit back and watch." Zhu Qi said solemnly, "Vice Messenger, you are wrong. Shanyang clan can't do it, but there are people in the West who can." Fan Liqing was shocked, and at the same time he said hesitantly, "But ever since we came to the northern heaven cold abyss, we haven't been in contact with those people in the west for thousands of years. But will it work?" Zhu Qi's eyes flickered. He said, "There's no need to contact them. We just need to spread the news of the cultivators from beyond the heavens to the west and exaggerate it. I don't believe that they won't make a move." Inside the turbid sky green, a gust of wind blew past, and Fu Baoxing walked out from it. He looked around and saw a huge lotus. He stepped on a cloud and came before the lotus. He bowed and asked, "Are you great sage Chu Lien?" An old face that was condensed from mist appeared on the lotus and said, "Yes, I am. May I know who you are?" Even though Fu Baoxing's qi was not as strong as him, he could tell that he was related to Zhang Yan, so he was very polite. Fu Baoxing said, "My name is not worth mentioning. I'm here to meet Demon King Chu Lien under my master's order." Great Sage Chu Lien was moved. He asked, "May I know who your master is?" Fu Baoxing said, "I came here 3 months ago. Do you still remember?" Great Sage Chu Lien said, "So you are that person's disciple." His heart was filled with eagerness. Since the other party was willing to talk to him, it meant that the other party could save his life. Fu Baoxing said, "The Ming clan has already been destroyed by the Zhenren of the various sects in the 9 continents. Now, the Cold Jade Ocean province belongs to the Yu Tsong sect. However, there are different opinions on how to deal with the Demon King." At this point, he intentionally paused for a moment before continuing. "A few Zhenren said that you, Demon King, are demons after all, and your nature is hard to change. Keeping you alive would be a disaster, so they proposed to kill you. However, Master said that you can still be of use to me, and said that I can let you live for now." Great Sage Chu Lien understood the meaning behind those words and said gratefully, "Yes, as long as you are willing to let me go, I can make a vow to serve you as my master forever." Fu Baoxing said, "You don't need to serve anyone as your master. You just need to guard the mountain gate of Qinsong School and protect the disciples. Can you do that?" Great Sage Chu Lien didn't understand the meaning behind the mountain gate, but it didn't stop him from expressing his attitude. He immediately said, "I will do whatever you want me to do." Fu Baoxing nodded and asked, "I heard that you have many subordinates outside?" Great Sage Chu Lien said, "Yes. Although I know that it will be necessary to kill them in order to destroy the Bright Demon Clan, as long as the ancestral spirit root is not destroyed, no matter how many you kill, it won't take long for them to regenerate." Fu Baoxing asked, "Isn't Demon King Curved Lotus worried that his ancestral veins and spirit roots will be severed?" Great Sage Chu Lien chuckled and said, "You might not know this, but in order to cultivate the divine power, I have already fused with the ancestral spirit root. I will live and die with it. However, I'm still here, which means that the spirit root is not destroyed." Fu Baoxing thought to himself, if this was true, then Great Sage Chu Lien was willing to tell me about such a secret. This was enough to show that he was sincere. However, it didn't matter even if he wasn't willing. As long as the vow was made, Fu Baoxing didn't have to worry about him going back on his word. He took a deep look at Great Sage Chu Lien and threw out a golden talisman contract. He said, "Demon King, you only need to inject a strand of your essence into it, and I will release you." Great Sage Chu Lien didn't hesitate and spat out a mouthful of essence. The contract trembled, and a dazzling golden light appeared on it. At the same time, he felt that there was a subtle connection between him and this item. Fu Baoxing reached out and took it back. He examined it and saw the phantom of a lotus flower on the contract. It was complete with roots, leaves, and buds. He knew that Great Sage Chu Lien wasn't lying. He nodded and said, "Great Sage Chu Lien, you're really smart. I will release you now." He took out a pill from his sleeve and gave it to Great Sage Chu Lien. He said, "Demon King, you only need to take this pill and you will be released." Great Sage Chu Lien was restrained by a kind of ghost poison, so he was constantly in a weak state. In this way, his vitality wouldn't be damaged, but he also couldn't fight against Great Sage Qing Pai. Zhang Yan also knew a little about alchemy, so he knew the reason when he came here that day. When he returned, he asked Zhou Changju to refine a pill for him to detoxify the poison. Great Sage Chu Lien spat out a breath and shattered the pill, then he sucked it in. Not long after, the entire ground shook slightly. Then, the branches and leaves stretched out, and his body slowly rose from the ground. Then, the leaves opened, and a cloud of smoke rose. A white-haired elder came out. He walked to Fu Baoxing, bowed and said gratefully, "Thank you, Great Sage Chu Lien, for helping me escape." Fu Baoxing said, "There's no need to thank me. I was just following orders. However, even though you've escaped, there are still many things that need to be arranged outside. I'll have to trouble you to stay here for a few days." Great Sage Chu Lien couldn't wait to leave, but since he had already gotten rid of the shackles, it wasn't unacceptable for him to wait for a few more days. Most importantly, he was restrained by the contract, so he didn't dare to disobey the other party's orders. Thus, he said, "Great Sage Chu Lien, don't worry. If no one calls for me, I won't dare to leave." Fu Baoxing rolled up his sleeves and kept all the bloodstones. Then, he rode the astral wind and flew out of the blue sky. When he was outside, he used his mana and went straight to the floating heavenly palace. When he landed outside the Hall of Duzhen, he sent a message and was called in. He walked into the hall and bowed. "Master, disciple has asked Great Sage Chu Lien to sign the contract." Then he took out the contract and presented it. Zhang Yan looked down, and the contract floated up and landed on the table in front of him. At that moment, Jing Yu walked in and said, "Master, Shaoqing Zhenren wants to see you." Zhang Yan thought about it and nodded. "Invite him in." Fu Baoxing bowed and said, "Master, disciple will take his leave first." Zhang Yan said, "Wait in the side hall first. I have something to tell you later." Fu Baoxing replied yes, bowed, and retreated first. Not long later, Ying Chuanqiu walked in. After greeting him, he said, "My sect Master Zhenren is patrolling outside the sky. He has already decided on a place for us to establish our sect, so he ordered me to discuss with Zhenren." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "Sect Master, you told me about this yesterday. I will definitely help your sect. However, this time, the enemy's strength is stronger than the Ming clan. Moreover, the journey is long. If we attack in a hurry, there will be a lot of casualties. We need to think about it at length." Ying Chuanqiu bowed and said, "Sect Master Zhenren has ordered that before he returns, everyone in Shaoqing can listen to Zhenren's arrangements." Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "All the sects in the 9 continents will advance and retreat together. Tomorrow, I will invite Zhenren to the hall to discuss this matter." Chapter 1267. On the second day, the bell above the frigid Jade Ocean province rang. When the spiritual masters of the various sects heard the sound, they all came out of their places of cultivation and turned into beams of spiritual light as they rushed to Butian Pavilion's conference hall. When all the spiritual masters had arrived, Zhang Yan said in a clear voice, "Thanks to your help in attacking the frigid Jade Ocean province, there are 100 strands of violet qi from the 9 heavens. They were collected by the 2 sect masters from the outer world and distributed to the various sects as a reward." When he finished speaking, he waved his sleeve and more than 100 beams of spiritual light flew down. The spiritual masters of the various sects all expressed their gratitude and put away the spiritual light that flew in front of them. Everyone here received 1 or 2 strands of pure violet spiritual qi. Wen Qingxiang, Tao Zhenhong, and the others even received a few strands. If the cultivators of the heavenly paradise received the help of pure violet spiritual qi, they could quickly improve their cultivation. However, the qi was scattered and could only be obtained by spiritual masters who collected it. It was very rare. Fortunately, this world had not been created for a long time, so the spiritual qi was still abundant. Otherwise, they would never have had the chance to use it. Zhang Yan waited for a moment, then said, "I called you here today because I have something to tell you. Sect Master Yu has found a mountain in the outer world for the Shaoqing sect's fellow Taoists to establish a foothold. Our next step is to attack this place." The spiritual masters of the various sects all looked over. They all had a feeling that the location of the Shaoqing sect's headquarters was not simple. Qi Hongchan asked, "Dare I ask, where is that boundary?" Zhang Yan said slowly, "It is in the Western Desolate Domain." When the spiritual masters heard that the Shaoqing sect wanted to establish their headquarters there, their expressions turned serious. After the cultivators of the 9 continents arrived in this world, they revealed their desire to form an alliance with the countries of the Eastern Wasteland. They also learned about the general distribution of power in this world. Among the 4 regions of the mountain and sea realm, the East, South, and North had no great power that unified the continent. Only the Western Desolate Domain had a powerful tribe called the Heavenly Ghost Tribe. As for their specific strength, they were not very clear before. After conquering the frigid Jade Ocean province, they received more detailed information from the Ming clan. The Heavenly Ghost Tribe had existed since its founding tens of thousands of years ago. Not only that, but they had practically brought the entire Western Absolute Domain into their hands through the marriage alliance and annexation. For thousands of years. Not only did this division not show any signs of decline. Instead, it became even more prosperous. As for the Mountain Sun clan that could compete with the exterminating Ming clan, they were merely a tribe that had migrated to the Northern Heavens Cold Abyss clan. According to Yun Zhu, the leader of the Cloudy Cloud tribe, almost all the Cloud Whale tribe, which came from the outer space, worked for the West Unique Domain, except for a few tribes that were stranded in the outer space. This showed how powerful the Cloud Whale tribe was. What made them even more vigilant was that, in the past tens of thousands of years, every time an extraterrestrial force came, it was always this Heavenly Ghost tribe. They would either take the initiative to take the lead or push them from behind. They would either enslave the newcomers or try to repel them. Everyone present was well aware that if the sects and clans of the 9 continents wanted to gain a foothold in the mountain and sea realm, then sooner or later, they would have to fight the Heavenly Ghost tribe. It was just that he didn't expect this day to come so quickly. Qi Hongchan thought for a moment, then said seriously, "Dao Master. Just now, we're going to take down the frigid Jade Sea Prefecture. Isn't that a bit too hasty?" Wen Qingxiang also said, "Looking at what the Heavenly Ghost tribe has done in the past, every time an extraterrestrial force invades, they would use the living beings of this realm to fight the enemy together. If I were to fight them, they might do the same thing again. Unfortunately, the sects and clans of the 9 continents might be besieged by all the natives of the mountain and sea realm. We have to be on guard." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "What the 2 Dao Masters are worried about is not without reason. I have already discussed this matter with the 2 sect masters. Now that the battle is over, it is indeed not a good time to make any moves. What the Dao Masters need to do now is to accumulate strength and guide the younger generation to face the coming battle." When the Dao Masters heard this, they all nodded subconsciously. Just now, they had just gone through a battle. Although it was not fierce, they still needed to rest and reorganize. Moreover, the purple pure spiritual opportunity that they had just now also needed some time to be used. After the battle of human tribulation, all the sects had suffered great losses. Each spiritual sect only had one person to support it. If they were careless and died in battle, they would definitely decline. In this realm, spiritual opportunity was almost inexhaustible. If they were given enough time, it was very likely that a few more Dao Masters would emerge from the younger generation. At that time, the sects would be able to use more power and have a greater chance of success. It could be foreseen that as time passed, the strength of the sects would also become more and more tyrannical. When Qingxiang thought carefully, then bowed and suggested, "Dao Master, I think that after I form an alliance with the countries of the Eastern Wilderness, we can find a way to support this generation. In the future, when we attack the Western Desolate Domain, we can also use this strength. To deal with the Heavenly Ghost tribe, the more helpers, the better. After all, the Eastern Wilderness had dozens of great mystic cultivators. With the help of the pattern, the power they could stir up was definitely not small. This was also a combat force that could not be underestimated." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I have the same idea. Among the 100 countries of the Eastern Wilderness, there are 6 big countries and 13 small countries. After forming an alliance with them, I intend to lead their disciples to join the sects of the 9 states." Wen Qingxiang praised, "This is a wonderful plan. The cultivation method of the 9 states was superior to that of the countries of humanity in this realm. If they had this opportunity to learn Tao, it could be imagined that the nobles and ministers of the various countries would definitely try to send their disciples over. When these disciples of the public clan had achieved success in cultivation, they could in turn exert influence on the 100 countries of the eastern wilderness. In this way, the relationship between the two sides would become closer and closer. What was more wonderful was that the sects of the 9 states followed the path of seclusion and sought longevity. They were not at all interested in the power and wealth of the mortal world, so there was no fundamental conflict between the two sides. Yuan Hongyang pondered for a moment and said, "Since we are going against the heavenly ghost tribe, we need to find out their background. Do you need our Ling sect to send people to infiltrate their tribe?" Zhang Yan smiled and said, "No problem. I have already made arrangements for this." Speaking of this, he transmitted a few words to Yuan Hongyang. Hearing this, Yuan Hongyang was startled at first, but then nodded. After discussing for half a day in the hall, they came to a decision. Then they dispersed amidst the ringing of the bell. They all understood that from this moment on, the battle between the cultivators of the 9 states and the heavenly ghost tribe had already begun. But the real battle might be decades or even hundreds of years later. Unlike the annihilation of the Ming clan, the heavenly ghost tribe was rumored to be guarded by the demon ancestor, and there was more than one of them. As for the demon saints under their command, there must be a lot of them. The danger of this battle was probably no less than that of the human tribulation, so they must do their best to improve their cultivation. In the hall, only Meng Zhen stayed alone. He was ordered to leave for 2 months, and only returned on the Cloud Whale when he heard the sect's summons yesterday. Zhang Yan invited Meng Zhen to the high platform and led him to take a seat. He asked, "Meng Zhen, did your trip go well?" Meng Zhen said in a deep voice, "The journey was smooth, and we didn't encounter any accidents. 10 days before I received the message from the sect, I found the resting place of the demon ancestor Huan Ming. However, this demon has set up a blood qi barrier around it, so it won't be easy to get close without disturbing it." Zhang Yan nodded and said, "As expected. Before we go against the heavenly ghost tribe, we need to get rid of this hidden danger." Meng Zhen said, "Do you need help from the sect's spiritual masters?" Zhang Yan shook his head and said, "The demon ancestor's magical power is above that great sage Qing Pai, so there's no need to trouble the spiritual masters with this matter. After I settle the matters here, I will personally go there." Taoist Meng nodded. After explaining everything that had been investigated, he stood up, cupped his hands, and left. Zhang Yan thought for a moment in the hall and said to Jing Yu, "Take the embracing star to the small jie and find that person. I want to see him." Jing Yu bowed and said, "I will go and deliver the order." In the small jie hut, Fang Xin and was breathing and regulating his breath. A parrot with blue feathers and yellow beak was standing on the fence, guarding him. To be safe, he had been cultivating in the small jie hut these days and rarely went out. Suddenly, the parrot turned into a seductive woman and landed. She said vigilantly, "Master, someone is coming." Fang Xin and was very careful and immediately withdrew from his cultivation. After a while, someone outside the door said, "Is fellow Taoist Fang here?" Fang Xin and could tell that it was an itinerant cultivator with the surname Li, and the place where he cultivated was not far from him. He answered, "So it's fellow Taoist Li." He got up and lifted the curtain to go out. When he went outside, he found that the other party didn't come alone. There was a black-robed Taoist with a solemn bearing standing next to him. He looked like a Yuanying spiritual master, so he couldn't help but show a hint of vigilance. Seeing him come out, the itinerant cultivator with the surname Li bowed to the Taoist and left. Fang Xin and looked over and asked in a deep voice, "May I know who fellow Taoist is?" The Taoist stepped forward and said, "Fellow Taoist Fang, I am Fu Baoxing, a disciple of Hall Master Du Zhen of Qinsong School. My master wants to see you." Fang Xin and was shocked, but he pretended to be surprised and said, "You must be joking. With spiritual master Zhang's status, why would he want to see an itinerant cultivator like me?" Fu Baoxing smiled and said, "My master indeed doesn't want to see you. He wants to see an old friend." Fong Xin-an's heart skipped a beat. At this moment, Sima Quan's voice sounded in his mind. Disciple, that spiritual master Zhang already knows that I'm here. Since he hasn't made a move yet, he must have some other purpose. Let's go and see him. Fong Xin hesitated. But master, that spiritual master Zhang might do you harm. Sima Quan said, with this spiritual master Zhang's methods, it would be a piece of cake if he wanted to kill us. Disciple, you don't have to think about anything else. Just follow him obediently. Fong Xin also knew that since the other party came to find him, he must have made preparations and wasn't afraid that he would escape. He took a breath and cupped his hands, saying, I'll go with Taoist Fu. Fu Baoxing cupped his hands and said with a pleasant expression, That's good. Fellow Taoist Fong, don't worry. This trip will be beneficial to you and the person behind you. He flicked his sleeve and a strong wind rose from the ground, wrapping around himself and Fong Xin. They turned into a ray of light and left the small world, heading towards the sky. Chapter 1268. Andu. Genius 1 second. Remember if you want to go? Talk Net, providing you with wonderful novels to read. Fast updates, refreshing website page, few advertisements. I like this kind of website the most. You must give it a good review. Fu Baoxing brought Fong Xin to the top of the floating celestial palace. When they arrived outside the Duzhen Hall, he put him down and said, Enlightened Sima, my master is in the hall. A gust of chilly wind blew past and gradually materialized. Then, Sima Quan appeared from within. Fong Xin came here from the 9 continents, and this was the first time he saw Sima Quan's real body. He immediately greeted, Master. Sima Quan nodded and said, Disciple, you can wait here. Fong Xin said yes. Sima Quan glanced at Fu Baoxing. The latter made a gesture for him to enter and he stepped inside. When he arrived at the main hall, he raised his head and saw Zhang Yan sitting on a praying mat. But with just a glance, he felt his body sway as if it was about to disappear. He was shocked and quickly used his mana to stabilize his body. Then he bowed and said, Master Zhang greets you. Zhang Yan nodded and smiled. Master Sima greets you. He stretched out his hand and said, Master, please. Sima Quan hesitated for a while before coming to the guest seat next to Zhang Yan and sitting down. Jing Yu walked over and placed 2 cups of tea on the table in front of him. Zhang Yan reached out to pick it up and said meaningfully, This tea is grown in this world. Compared to the 9 provinces' celestial tea, it has a different taste. Master Sima, why don't you try it? Sima Quan picked up the cup and took a sip. As soon as he drank it, he felt a cool and refreshing flow flowing through his body. His originally illusory figure became much more stable. He closed his eyes to adjust his breathing. After a while, he opened his eyes again and praised, Good tea. He then looked outside. I didn't expect your sect to gain a foothold in this world so quickly. Speaking of which, I haven't been out since I arrived in this world. Zhang Yan smiled and shook his sleeve. The entire hall seemed to have suddenly vanished, and the surging seawater below and the indistinct mountains in the distance could be seen. He said, This world is named the Ocean of Mountains. But even though this world is good, there are many enemies as well. Sima Quan glanced over. He said, The name, Shanghai, fits the scenery perfectly. He took another sip of tea, put down the teacup, and looked up. He asked, Taoist Master, do you have any business with me? Zhang Yan smiled and said, There is indeed one matter, and only Master Sima is the most suitable person to step forward. Sima Quan knew that if he was useless to the various sects, he would have been dragged out and killed long ago. He didn't have the capital to put on heirs, so he said, Taoist Master, please tell me the details. If I can help, I won't refuse. Zhang Yan waved his hand, causing the geomancy map of the mountain and sea realm to float down beneath their feet. Pointing at the western region, he said, There's a group called Heavenly Ghost in this area, and it's no small matter. It's a powerful enemy of the sects and clans of the 9 continents. I need Taoist Master Sima to go there and find out more about their true strength. If we can secretly break it up, it would be best to read it in full. Sima Quan thought for a while and said, I agree. He couldn't refuse this matter. As for the specific details of this world, for a heavenly demon, he only needed to casually create a few clones to find out what he wanted to know. Zhang Yan nodded and said, if Master Sima has any requests, feel free to say it. Sima Quan thought for a while and said, I need to refine a few magic treasures. Zhang Yan smiled and said, of course. If you need anything, just let me know. Someone will send it over. Sima Quan said, there is one more thing. That disciple of mine will stay in your sect to cultivate. Zhang Yan nodded and said, fellow Taoist disciple was originally a disciple of the Southern Flower sect, and his cultivation method is even more orthodox. I can send him to the Clear Feather sect and ask Tao Zhenren to give him some pointers, so he won't neglect his cultivation. How could Sima Quan not know that the Clear Feather sect had many cultivation methods that came from the same source as the Southern Flower sect? Placing this disciple in this sect was indeed the best choice. He cupped his hands and said, thank you, Taoist master. Zhang Yan's gaze shifted. Jing Yu understood and walked forward. He took out a contract and placed it on the table. Sima Quan didn't hesitate at all. With a point of his finger, a strand of origin energy was left within. Then he said, once I've finished refining the magic treasure, I'll immediately set off. It won't take long. Zhang Yan smiled and said, fellow Taoist Sima doesn't need to be so impatient. The Western Desolate Domain is very far from here. No matter if this person attacks or if we fight our way over, we will need some time to prepare. This matter doesn't need to be fast. The more stable, the better. Sima Quan's mind turned and he said, I understand. Zhang Yan smiled slightly and said, now that fellow Taoist Yuan has inherited the position of the Nether Spring Sect Master, if you can make a great contribution to the sects of the 9 continents, I can try to persuade you to return to the Nether Spring Sect. When Sima Quan heard this, he was moved and asked in a deep voice, really? After becoming a heavenly demon, he had thought of returning to the sect, but he didn't get to do so. Not only that, he was also worried that Zhang Yan would burn the bridge after crossing it. After eliminating the heavenly demon, Zhang Yan would come back and kill him. But if he could return to the sect, it would be different. Not only could he keep his life, he could also keep his inheritance, and no one would come to kill him again. Zhang Yan said with a serious expression, of course it's true. Fellow Taoist Sima, although you have the body of a heavenly demon, looking at what you did in the past, you are different from those mindless demons. We came from the 9 continents through the void just to open up a new world. For this, we can even let go of the grudges between the Xian and Ling clans. How can we not accept fellow Taoist alone? Sima Quan stood up and solemnly bowed. He said, thank you for your trust, Zhenren. Then I will go and prepare now. Zhang Yan shook his sleeve and threw an item over. He said, this is a refined abode. There are 3 bottles of soul refining water inside, which can help fellow Taoist improve his cultivation. After receiving it, Sima Quan bowed again and turned to leave the hall. Jing Yu said, is Master not afraid of him having the body of a heavenly demon? Zhang Yan said with a faint smile, when the West Continent's cultivators came to the east, even the Nian Zhenyin demon was killed. Why would we be afraid of a heavenly demon? Moreover, Sima Quan is not a real demon. He still has many scruples in his actions. Otherwise, with his methods, even if he cannot do anything to the Zhenren of the sects, he can still cause chaos in the world. After traveling for almost 3 months, the envoy sent by the Shanyang clan finally arrived at the Frost Jade Ocean region. In the palace on the back of the Divine Ray, a clansman walked over and bowed. He said, Clan Elder, Noble Fan Li, in front of us is the ancestral land of the Ming clan. In a few days we will arrive there. Zhu Qi said, have we arrived? He put down the silk book in his hand and said to Fan Li Qing, follow me to take a look. Fan Li Qing smiled and said, that's fine. It's boring to sit in this temple all day. Let's go for a walk, Clan Elder. The 2 of them left their seats and walked out of the room. Behind them, there were many bare-chested people, each holding a plate filled with fresh fruits and wine. They followed carefully. Zhu Qi walked out and looked at the mountains in the distance. He said, "What a pity. If it wasn't for the endless infighting in the clan and the inability to support the Shanyang clan, this territory might have already belonged to me. Who knows, this land might already be mine. How could those bird demons have a chance?" Fan Liqing agreed from the side, but he didn't think much of it. Back then, even if the Shanyang clan and Lian Xindia worked together, they might not be able to suppress the Ming clan. Not to mention that the Bright Radiance demonic forefather was still slumbering underground. The Heaven Ghoul race would not offend such a great demon for a clan that had moved away for thousands of years. Zhu Qi looked around and found that their journey was unusually smooth. They didn't run into any blood energy barrier. He said in surprise, "The Outer World cultivators have occupied this territory. They didn't set up any defensive measures?" Fan Liqing picked a fruit and put it into his mouth. He smiled and said, "I heard that these Outer World cultivators don't cultivate blood energy, so they don't know how to set up blood energy barriers." Zhu Qi's gaze suddenly noticed a beam of light that shot into the sky. He asked curiously, "What is that?" Fan Liqing looked over and said, "Maybe it's the arrangement of those Outer World cultivators." Zhu Qi said, "Let's go and take a look." Under his order, the two-headed divine ray turned slightly and moved in that direction under the command of hundreds of servants. When they got closer, they could finally see more clearly. There was an island below them. On the mountain ridge, there was a jade platform that was 3,000 meters tall. The spirit light was coming from it. Not only that, the light covered an area of 10,000 kilometers. Fan Liqing said, "As expected, it's something like a blood energy barrier. Clan Elder, can we go around it?" Zhu Qi thought and said coldly, "Let's crash through it." Fan Liqing was startled. He immediately realized what was going on. This was to teach the Outer World cultivators a lesson. Even if they crashed through it, they would have to turn around and apologize. He also didn't want to fall out with the messengers who came from afar over such a small matter. He shouted at the servants who were controlling the divine ray, "What are you waiting for? Didn't you hear what the clan elder said? Crash into it." The servants didn't dare to disobey him. They controlled the divine ray and charged toward the spirit light. In less than 10 breaths of time, a loud bang resounded as it collided with the light from the restrictive formation. However, to their surprise, the light barrier didn't budge at all. In fact, this formation was set up to defend against monsters like the ancient monster saints. It wasn't that easy to break through. Zhu Qi's expression darkened. He felt embarrassed and shouted, "Crash into it again." Below, the altar was attacked. The cultivators guarding the place were alarmed. Streaks of light flew into the sky, only to realize that there were enemies invading. This time, it wasn't just the top 10 disciples of the Qinsong school who came out to search for precious materials. There were also cultivators from various sections. The ones who built the altar were the disciples of the Shaoqing sect and the Lishan sect. A female disciple of the Lishan sect was slightly flustered. She said, "What a huge demonic bird. Senior brothers, should we use the cloud whale to return?" A Shaoqing sect disciple said, "Hold on. When I came out, the sect gave me a movement talisman. With the help of the altar, we can invite the sect's perfected one over." The female disciple said happily, "Then I'll leave it to you, senior brother." The Shaoqing sect disciple took out a talisman and tossed it onto the altar. All of a sudden, the spiritual vigor accumulated in the spell altar was sucked away like a whale. After a while, a green-robed Taoist with sharp features and a high-nose bridge walked out from the spiritual light. He raised his head and looked at the sky. There was a cold gleam in his eyes. Then he merged with the sword light and rushed into the sky. At the same time, Zhu Qi and Fan Liqing saw a sword light that seemed to be able to split heaven and earth rise up and slash at them. Oh no! Their expressions couldn't help but change. Both of them felt that the light seemed to contain a might that could obliterate all vitality, and they hurriedly transformed into afterimages as they dodged to the side. In the next moment, as the sword light swept past, the divine ray was slashed into two from head to tail. Chapter 1269. The Shanyang clan was originally a branch of the Heavenly Ghost. Regardless of their status, every member of the Shanyang clan was born with the ability to morph into an ethereal form. The more blood chi they had, the more times they could use this ability, and the longer the duration of the ability. With this blood chi ability, the Shanyang clan was able to hold their ground against the annihilating bird and the lotus heart butterfly. When the sword light slashed down, the people of the Shanyang clan instinctively activated their blood chi and turned into an ethereal form. Most of them managed to dodge the attack. Zhu Qi and Fan Liqing never thought of starting a war with the cultivators of the 9 regions. They only wanted to destroy the light barrier and show off their capabilities so that they could gain an advantageous position in the negotiation. However, they did not expect that the cultivators of the 9 regions would retaliate so quickly and fiercely. Zhu Qi saw that the person did not intend to stop after killing the divine ray. He raised his sword again and shouted, "Stop! We are the envoys of the Shanyang clan. Just now, this is just a misunderstanding." Sun Huaying's expression was cold. She did not listen to what he said at all. She turned around and slashed at him. Zhu Qi's expression changed again. However, since he turned into an ethereal form, he was no longer afraid of external attacks. Hence, he did not dodge. However, if the Shaoqing sword art could only kill tangible things, how could it deal with the cultivators of the demon sect? The sword light flashed across the sky and Zhu Qi's body was slashed into 2. Fan Liqing was shocked. "Clan elder?" Although Zhu Qi only had half of his body left, the strange thing was that he did not cry out in pain and only half a drop of blood flowed out. After a flash, he recovered. However, compared to before, his body looked much thinner and his face was extremely pale. It was as if he did not expect that his ethereal body could be hit by the sword light. Yang Yansheng also dodged the sword light's slash just now. He turned into an ethereal form and floated in the air. Seeing this, he exclaimed in his heart, "Zhu clan's perfect connection technique." He could not help but show a look of envy. Once this kind of blood essence divine ability was born, the body would no longer have any obvious weaknesses. No matter which part of the body was cut off, it would immediately grow back. And this was an ability that only the people of the upper 6 tribes could obtain. He was just a lowly commoner of the lower 6 tribes. Apart from a few people who were favored by the heavens, no matter how strong their chi and blood were, the divine abilities they obtained were still inferior and could not be compared to those of the upper levels. However, he did not know that Zhu Qi was not having a good time. That sword not only cut his body in half, but also cut off a lot of his essence chi. In addition, the chaotic connection technique also consumed his essence chi. Just now, that strike had taken away at least 100 years of his life. If he used up too much of his origin energy, he would no longer be able to transform into a corporeal body. Even if he could live, he would forever be an illusory image. Even if he could be seen by others, he would never be able to interact with the people in the real world. When Sun Huaying saw that her attack had failed to kill her opponent, there was no change in her expression. She raised her sword and slashed out again. Zhu Qi was shocked and angry at the same time. He shouted loudly, "I am an elder of the upper 6 tribes of Mount Yang. My status is very high. Do you want to start a war with the Mountain Sun clan?" However, no matter what he said, Sun Huaying ignored him and only used her flying sword to attack him. Zhu Qi saw that he could not persuade Sun Huaying, he could only try to retreat. However, the sword light was extremely fast. No matter where he tried to hide, it would catch up to him in a very short time. Under the continuous slashes, his body gradually became erratic. Fan Liqing saw that the situation was not good. He was not like the elder Zhu Qi. He had the divine ability that was comparable to the great sage ancient monster. He could not help even if he wanted to. Thus, he turned around, abandoned everyone and ran away alone. With him leading the way, the hearts of the people were in chaos. Other than a few loyal people who still refused to leave, most of the people also ran away. However, the lowly slaves were much more pitiful. Their bodies were already branded with iron fire marks. Once their masters died, they would also lose their lives. They could not leave even if they wanted to. Yang Yansheng was only a servant. He did not have any marks on his body, but he did not leave. Instead, he watched without blinking. There was shock and excitement in his eyes. Looking at the unreachable elder in front of him now in such a sorry state, he did not even dare to think about it. I heard that these cultivators from beyond the heavens do not cultivate chi and blood, they cultivate another kind of technique. If I can learn it and become powerful, I will no longer be restricted by the rules of the clan. On the battlefield, Zhu Qi was getting more and more panicked. He knew that if he took another 10 sword strikes, he would die here. His face twitched and showed a ferocious expression. He shouted, "Since you don't want to stop, then don't blame me." He also had a divine ability. It was called Internal Snatch. Even in the upper 6 divisions, only a few people knew how to use this technique. It could rush into the opponent's body when they turned into void and snatch their flesh and blood. Not only that, but it was also possible to obtain the divine abilities that the opponent had when they were alive. His eyes shone brightly. He hugged his knees and curled up his body, suddenly turning into a wisp of smoke. He endured the sword light that came slashing at him and quickly tunneled into Sun Huaying's body. However, as soon as he arrived within the room, he opened his eyes, yet what he saw wasn't a body of flesh and blood, and there was only an expanse of boundless sword light. He instantly knew that the situation was bad, and he intended to struggle anxiously in his state of great shock. However, it was already useless at this moment because the sword chi from all directions had come over to mingle with him, and he was instantly annihilated. Sun Huang withdrew the sword light and stood in the sky. This body of his was only formed by his manifestation. His real body was not here. Qi Zhu dared to barge in like this, he was undoubtedly digging his own grave. The Shaoqing disciples below came up one by one and bowed. "Greetings, perfected one." Sun Huaying said, "Capture all the people who escaped. Don't let any of them escape." The Shaoqing disciples responded in unison. In an instant, over a dozen sword lights flew in all directions. An hour later, the incident here was sent to the floating heavenly palace through the flying swords. After receiving the news, Zhang Yan thought for a while and said, "So it's the Shanyang clan's envoy." Jing Yu asked, "Master, should we ask perfected one Sun to come and ask him?" Zhang Yan waved his sleeve and said plainly, "It's fine. It's not a big deal if they're killed." The Shanyang clan should be a chess piece that the Heavenly Ghost tribe had purposely placed in the northern cold abyss. Since the various sects had already decided on the plan to attack the Heavenly Ghost tribe, it was destined that they could not reconcile with them. Although it was a little early to fall out with them, it did not affect the overall situation. He pondered for a while and asked again, "Where are the people that were captured now?" Jing Yu said, "They have been temporarily detained in the Hai province." Zhang Yan said, "Send these people to Zhou Xian. He should know how to deal with them." Jing Yu nodded and bowed before retreating. Zhang Yan glanced at the sacrificial rack in front of him and reached out to grab it. A blood jade flew over from above and landed in his palm. Inside the blood jade was a ball of red flame flowing light. As it rotated, it produced rays of brilliant light that flickered in the hall. Within it, there seemed to be a fledgling flapping its wings. This jade was found from the mountain bloodstones that were piled up like a mountain by the great sage Qing Pai. It was a treasure that grew naturally. Those bloodstones were originally ordinary jade stones, but after being continuously nourished by this item for thousands of years, its essence had changed. He was very clear that if such a rare treasure was carefully refined, there was a high possibility that it could become a supreme treasure. It was even possible that it could be refined into a sex talisman. To him, the effect of the treasure was secondary. The key was that this item could be imbued with Xian techniques. With the power of a mortal molten cultivator, it would take at least 100 years to evolve a Xian technique. He would even need to transform his own origin essence qi. The price was not small. During the tribulation of human, many of the Xian techniques used by the two sects were left behind by their predecessors. The sect leader's luck was only a small portion of them. No matter how powerful the Heavenly Ghost was, It would only take a few Xian techniques to kill most of the monsters and demons other than the demon ancestor. However, the Western Sky absolute domain was too vast. The Xian techniques might not be able to completely cover it. At that time, they could only target a few main territories. Therefore, Sima Quan needed to investigate the details first. If all of this went smoothly, then the rest of the matter would be simple. He and the 2 sect masters would block the demon ancestor, and the various spiritual masters would then go and clean up the heavenly ghost tribe scattered in the dead domain. In this way, they could destroy this generation as quickly as possible. However, in order to reduce the number of casualties, this was not the only preparation that Zhang Yan made. After he put away the blood jade, he moved his mind, and in a flash of spiritual light, he had already come to the white mountain below. At this time, a green lotus emerged on the mountain ridge, and an old man stood out from it. It was the great sage Crooked Lotus. He learned the etiquette of the 9 continents, bowed and said, "Great sage." Zhang Yan nodded to him and walked into the tunnel. After about 100 steps, he came to a huge cave. The place was full of fire and lava. The heat was oppressive, and the swaying red light shone on his eyes. This was the earthly fire heavenly furnace that he had temporarily opened by using his power to guide the earthly fire. At this moment, when Qingxiang, Hibiko Higashi, Tao Zhenhong, Han Ziyang, LV Junyang, Ning Chongxian, Pang Yunxiang, Wu Wei, and the rest of the 8 heavenly abodes were sitting around. They seemed to be operating their mana and refining something. When the heavenly abodes saw him come in, they all stood up and greeted him. After Zhang Yan nodded to greet them, he looked at Tao Zhenren and asked, "Sect leader Tao, can those demon corpses be used?" Tao Zhenren said, "Although these corpses' qi and blood have dried up, there is still a bit of spiritual light that has not been extinguished. Even if they can't be resurrected, they have not completely lost their vitality. They are excellent treasures." Zhang Yan nodded. He was preparing to gather the many demon corpses to refine a ferocious creature like the demon of severance to fight against the heavenly ghost tribe that was about to become their enemy. He looked at the furnace and asked, "How long does Tao Zhenren think it will take to refine this thing?" Tao Zhenren thought for a while and said, "With the help of the heavenly abodes, it should be done within 100 years. Chapter 1270. In a certain island in the Frost Jade Ocean continent, the Shanyang clan's envoys were imprisoned. Yang Yanxing was imprisoned in an underground stone dungeon. When he was captured by the Shaoqing disciples, he did not resist much, so he did not have a restriction placed on him like the rest of the envoys. He tried to transform into an ethereal body to see if he could get out of this place. He did not do it to escape, but to test the techniques of these cultivators from beyond the heavens. However, he found out that he was blocked by an invisible barrier, which surprised him and made him even more eager to learn this technique. 3 days later, he was summoned to a green-robed cultivator. Yang Yanxing bowed to the green-robed cultivator according to the etiquette, which was quite decent. The green-robed cultivator was slightly surprised, but then he smiled and said, "Interesting, interesting." Over the past few days, he had met many people from the Shanyang clan's diplomatic mission. However, whenever he asked a question, they would either tremble in fear and speak incoherently, or their faces were filled with hatred and they refused to speak. As for this group of people, he couldn't be bothered with them and threw them aside. He would ask the disciples of the Ling sect to come and interrogate their souls. He asked, "What's your name? How old are you, and which Shanyang clan are you from?" Yang Yanxing answered truthfully. As for the next few questions, he was unusually cooperative. He answered whatever he was asked without holding anything back. However, he was only a lowly person after all, and his knowledge was limited. But even so, the green-robed cultivator was very satisfied, and finally waved his hand, "Take him away, don't treat him harshly." Yang Yanxing stood still, he gritted his teeth, bowed and said, "Sir, I want to learn from you. I wonder if you can accept me?" The green-robed cultivator was a little surprised. "You mean you want to become a disciple of the 9 continents?" Yang Yanxing nodded seriously, his eyes were filled with sincerity. The green-robed cultivator looked at him carefully, and suddenly smiled. He said, I can't make the decision on this matter, so I'll bring you to see someone. Whether it succeeds or not, it all depends on this person. After that, with a flick of his sleeves, he swept him over and left. Yang Yansheng first felt dizzy. When he woke up, he found himself in front of a hut. The green-robed cultivator said, Wait here. Yang Yansheng nodded. They stood obediently outside the room. After a while, the green-robed cultivator came out again and said to him, Go in. Yang Yansheng walked in with a perturbed heart. Zhou Xian was sitting behind the table, flipping through the bamboo slips brought by the Shanyang envoy group. Different from ordinary demons, the Shanyang clan had their own language, which usually contained useful information. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from outside. He didn't raise his head and continued to flip through the bamboo slips. He asked, So, you want to be a disciple of my 9 regions? Yes, Yang Yansheng replied. Zhou Xian tossed the bamboo slip aside and looked at him. He asked, You're a member of the Shanyang clan, and you're not one of those branded slaves. Why do you want to be my disciple? Yang Yansheng clenched his fists and said, I'm a member of the Shanyang clan, but in the eyes of the upper 6 tribes, I'm just a lowly peasant. I don't want to be a lowly peasant anymore. Zhou Xian could tell that there was a story behind this young man, but he didn't want to delve into it. After looking at him for a while, he said, I can give you a chance. Yang Yansheng was stunned. He didn't expect it to be so easy. Zhou Xian threw a talisman to him and said, Take this talisman. Head east and find a place where birds live. Someone will come and teach you the way of cultivation. Yang Yansheng caught it and held it tightly in his hand. He bowed and said, Thank you, Great Shen. Zhou Xian waved his hand at him. Yang Yansheng bowed again. He suppressed the excitement in his heart and left the hut. Zhou Xian didn't take it to heart and continued to flip through the bamboo slips. At this moment, a disciple who was serving at the side said, Teacher, are you really going to let him join the 9 regions? Zhou Xian said, Of course. The disciple hesitated and said, He's a member of the Shanyang clan. Do you want to see? Zhou Xian's movements paused and looked over. What do you think we should do with him? The disciple said without hesitation, Since he's an enemy, then we should just kill him. This way, we won't leave any future troubles. Zhou Xian shook his head and laughed. You are thinking too simply. If all living beings in the world are against me, then we should just kill them all? By then, who's going to pick herbs for you? Who's going to farm for you? Who's going to make clothes for you? Who's going to drive the chariots for you? Who's going to build the buildings for you? When a cultivator reached a high level, he could be self-sufficient with just a breath of spiritual qi in his body. To them, these things weren't essential. If they were in a mood, they could just use their magic power and divine arts to transform them. But it was different for the junior disciples. They needed food and clothing, and they needed to wear luxurious clothes. These couldn't be obtained out of thin air. In the 9 regions, some of the things that the junior disciples needed were provided by the lower countries, some were provided by the cultivator's own clan, and some were given by the sect. The disciple was startled, and he said thoughtfully, Teacher, are you planning to turn the Shanyang clan into my own? Zhou Xian said meaningfully, In the Shanyang clan, only the 6 upper divisions are considered noble, and the 36 lower divisions are just lowly commoners. They were born with nothing, and this hierarchy was learned from the Heavenly Ghost clan in the West Sky Desolate Domain. If I can give them a chance to turn the tables, how do you think they will choose? The disciple was enlightened, and he said in admiration, Teacher, you have great foresight, but I'm foolish. Just now, I understand the meaning behind your words. Zhou Xian shook his head, and he said in a self-deprecating tone, I can only think about these things. If it wasn't for the fact that I have no hope of achieving Tao in this life, why would I think about these things? At this moment, another cultivator came in and he bowed and said, Enlightened Master, Fan Li Qing is here to see you. Zhou Xian acknowledged and he sat up straight. Summon him in. A moment later, Fan Li Qing walked in, but he didn't look good. Zhou Xian smiled. Have you thought it through? Fan Li Qing smiled bitterly. Since you have a secret technique to search my memories, Why do you have to force me to write it down? Zhou Xian smiled. Vice envoy, you should know the difference. Fan Liqing was helpless and he sighed, saber and brush. Zhou Xian gestured, and a disciple brought the saber, brush, and bone board over. After Fan Liqing took it, he gritted his teeth and wrote down all the secrets he knew one by one. When he was done, his spirit seemed to have been sucked out, and he became much more dispirited. Zhou Xian took a look, and he nodded. He ordered someone to keep it, and he said, "There's one more thing. Your Shanyang clan doesn't know about this. Can you try to delay the time when they find out?" Fan Liqing hesitated for a moment. He said, "Zhu Qifang is the head envoy, and the clan needs his blood and qi as a seal. I can only delay it for half a year at most, and any longer would be useless. The clan must be suspicious of me." Zhou Xian said, "Half a year? Although it's not long, it's enough. Just do your best, Fan Liqing." While the cultivators of Qinsong were dealing with the Shanyang clan's messengers, Zhang Yan left the floating heavenly palace and headed southwest alone. This time, he was going to eliminate the radiant brightness demonic forefather. He glanced at the Mieming demon star in the sky. From great sage Chu Lian, he learned that the demons in the mountain and sea realm had their own heavenly star. If the tribe thrived, the starlight would shine brightly. If the tribe perished, the starlight would dim. If the tribe perished, the starlight would no longer shine brightly. Although the radiant brightness demonic star was dim, there was still a glimmer of light flickering faintly, as if it could shine again at any time. That was because the radiant brightness demonic forefather was still alive, and he had a connection with the younger generation of the tribe. The Mieming tribe might wake up from its long slumber at any time. If it was just one demonic forefather, the sects of the 9 continents were not afraid. However, if it colluded with other forces, such as the Shanyang clan or the Heavenly Ghost, it would not be easy to deal with. Therefore, the earlier it was done, the safer it would be. After leaving the cold Jade Ocean continent, he took out a Dharma art and instantly broke through the void, arriving at an array disc. This was a teleportation Dharma artifact that Mengzhen had left along the way when he was scouting. This was to make it easier for people to come here. At this moment, Zhang Yan was only using the array disc to sense the spiritual opportunity, but he did not use it to travel. This Dharma artifact could not withstand the heavy pressure of him and the black tortoise's aura. After traveling for half a day, he finally arrived at the Earth realm. In front of him was a vast land that was 1/3 the size of the cold Jade Ocean continent. He could tell that this was not a natural phenomenon, but someone had used a great divine ability to move it from other places and then gather it together. In his eyes, this land was bathed in a blood-red brilliance. This was the blood and qi barrier that the Wanming demonic forefather had left here. If he wanted to find the demonic forefather, he would have to break this barrier. However, if he did that, it would be completely alarmed. This blood and qi barrier was extremely vast. If he were to set up a formation here, the precious materials needed would be enough to set up several mountain gate formations. However, it was not worth it for a single demonic forefather. However, since the great demonic forefather was in a deep slumber, how could he not use this advantage? After observing for a while, he sat down to regulate his breathing. Before long, the magic power that he had used up was completely restored. He flipped his palm and took out the dragon soul essence. In the 9 continents, this item could control the water of the 4 seas. However, in the mountain and sea realm, because of the difference in aura, it was not as useful. However, he did not bring it with him to control the seawater, but to make it easier to control the deep abyss heavy water. He poured his magic power into it, and a moment later, his body was surrounded by lightning. The door to the mysterious gate paradise was wide open, and the deep abyss heavy water rushed out, turning into a river that circled around. As the dragon soul essence lit up, it dispersed and turned into droplets of heavy water that floated in the sky. Soon, they entered the clouds and rose higher and higher. Soon, they crossed the blood and qi barrier and arrived above the virtual sky. After setting up the water, he shook his sleeve and stood up, then silently circulated his magic power. As his aura condensed, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble faintly. Then a majestic aura pressed down, and the clouds above the dome dispersed, revealing the ancient void sky. Waves rolled above the northern cold abyss, and the islands within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles collapsed and were swallowed by the turbulent waves. The layers of blood and chi barrier swayed, looking like a candle in the wind, as if it would shatter at any moment. With such a shocking momentum, even the Wanming demonic forefather, who was sleeping below the continent, showed signs of waking up. Zhang Yan was not going to wait for him to wake up. Now that his magic power had reached its peak, he let out a loud roar and punched the continent in front of him. Chapter 1271. Zhang Yan's punch caused the ground in front of him to collapse. Billions of hectares of seawater disappeared into thin air. Such a huge commotion also alerted many of the demon clans in the northern cold abyss. Inside the Mountain Sun clan, a few strange faces rose up from the mountains and rivers. They flew out of the abyss and looked towards the southeast direction in shock. What is it? This momentum, is it the demon ancestor Dozhan? That's the direction. That's where the Wanming demonic ancestor hibernates. Those extraterrestrial cultivators must have found it. The few Shan Yang clan elders were all shocked. The monster ancestor was different. He was the origin of the bloodline. Even if Qing Pai Great Sage had cultivated the 24 wings, he wouldn't be able to compete with the monster ancestor. They didn't expect these outer heavens cultivators to come knocking on their door. Elder Qiu was silent for a while before saying, "Unfortunately, we have greatly underestimated these outsiders. Zhu Qi should have arrived at the Frost Jade Ocean province by now, right?" Another elder, Daoren, said, "If there are no accidents, they should be here." Prisoner Captain Daoren said, "The Qi Zhu tribe's elder told me that this young man will come to our tribe sooner or later, and he asked me to contact the ancestral tribe as soon as possible. But if he is able to fight against the demon ancestor, then the Shanyang tribe will not be able to stop him. For the safety of our tribe, it seems like we will have to ask the ancestral tribe for help." Including Qi Zhu, the Mountain Sun clan only had 8 clan elders, and their strength was only equivalent to that of a Yao saint. Although there were some mighty figures like the Yao ancestor in the clan, they were all in the ancestral clan of the heavenly ghosts. If they were in danger of being exterminated, they would not be able to come to their aid. Are we really going to ask the ancestral clan for help? Many elders could not help but hesitate. Back then, the Shanyang clan was ordered to come to the northern heaven cold abyss so that it would be convenient for the heavenly ghost ancestral division to take over this continent in the future. But after thousands of years, they could be considered to have opened up a medium scale of power, and after being a feudal lord for a long time, they naturally had their own thoughts and were unwilling to be controlled by others. Coincidentally, the heavenly ghosts ancestral clan was unable to expand due to the fierce internal strife. They seemed to have forgotten about them, so they were happy to pretend to be deaf and mute. But if they really encountered a great enemy that they couldn't resist, then they had no choice but to consider asking the ancestral division for help. Elder Qiu said, "You are all just afraid that the ancestral tribe will come and take away your positions. You are just my people. It has been under our control for thousands of years, so how can it be taken away so easily? With old ancestor here, we don't have to be afraid of them using force." An elder worriedly said, "I'm just afraid that the people from the ancestral branch might not be willing to work for me." Elder Qiu laughed coldly and said, "If the opponent was to destroy the Ming clan, I wouldn't have done so. Perhaps the ancestral clan won't interfere, but these enemies come from beyond the heavens and hinder the ancestral clan's grand plan. Those old fogies will definitely not ignore them." His words finally convinced the rest of the elders. After discussing for a while, another elder said, "Elder Zhu, tell him to stall for as long as possible. No matter what the outsiders propose, he can agree to it for the time being and wait for the ancestral tribe to arrive. There's no need to be afraid." Outside the Frost Jade Ocean Prefecture, the bright radiance demonic forefather had completely awakened, and a blood chi surged up from the depths of the ground. With a rumble, it was as if underground fire was erupting. Dust and gravel surged up, gradually forming the shape of a giant bird in the sky. It had 24 wings on its back, and at the same time, the sky suddenly darkened. The light of the sun and the moon rose up. Everything retreated. Zhang Yan looked up and saw that this demon bird was very different from the demons of the mountain and sea realm he had seen before. Even Great Sage Green Plum had flesh and bones, but this demon had a body. It seemed to be formed from blood qi. At this moment, his heart trembled slightly, as if he had thought of something, but now was not the time to think about it. Taking advantage of the fact that its body hadn't completely gathered, he punched it again. He knew that the Annihilation Bird clan had 9 deaths, and even Great Sage Green Plum had cultivated his fleshly body to an indestructible state. So there was no need to even mention this demonic forefather. Therefore, he didn't hope to seriously injure it, but to seize the initiative. When its body was destroyed, even the demonic forefather would need to reform it. At that time, it would lose the ability to fight. If everything went smoothly, he would be able to firmly suppress it. Sure enough, the bright radiance demonic forefather in the sky was hit, and before it could completely reform, it exploded. However, even though his body had dispersed, the 12 pairs of blood-red feathers didn't seem to be affected in the slightest, and they converged and fluttered about. At this instant, it actually gave rise to a bewitching sense of beauty, and then layer after layer of vital energy and blood barriers were formed, and they actually completely blocked off the attacks that surged over like a tide. Not only that, but the blood qi in the sky surged, and at the same time, more than 10 divine abilities appeared. The sky was chaotic, and multicolored light sprayed out as they all rained down. Zhang Yan looked on coldly. He stood there with his hands clasped behind his back, but he had no intention of dodging. The black tortoise under his feet roared, and thousands of streams of black water rose up, turning into a water wall that blocked all the divine abilities. Zhang Yan looked at the wings of blood qi that fluttered around and squinted his eyes. The bright radiance demonic forefather had obviously broken away from the shackles of ordinary demons. Every trace of blood qi could be seen as its location. At this stage, it actually didn't need a body at all. There was almost no record of the demonic forefather's ability in the Eastern Barren Country, and there was even less information about the annihilation of the Ming clan. This was the first time he saw it. However, from the looks of it, there were only 2 ways to defeat the enemy. One was to exhaust the enemy's blood qi, and the other was to take away his soul like how he dealt with Great Sage Green Plum. However, considering that he would have to fight against the Sky Demon in the future, he would definitely have to fight against a powerful enemy of this level. Since it was a rare opportunity, he wanted to observe the demonic forefather's methods and divine abilities. He didn't want to use his killer move immediately. When he fought against Great Sage Green Plum previously, he was alone. At this moment, with the protection of the black tortoise, he didn't need to worry about the enemy at all. He just needed to use his full strength. There were continuous explosions in the world. Under the bombardment of his punches, the bright radiance demonic forefather's body was constantly broken. However, as long as a wing of such a great demon was still intact, it could continue to use its divine abilities. From the looks of it, both sides seemed to be evenly matched. After a few dozen breaths of time, Zhang Yan's gaze flickered slightly. He gradually noticed that this demonic ancestral demon didn't live up to its reputation at all. No matter if it was using divine abilities or other actions, it seemed to be extremely stiff, let alone using any battle tactics. In particular, in every attack, it used its full strength without leaving any room for maneuver. This was completely based on instinct, and there was no intelligence to speak of. From the looks of it, it was more like a wild beast than a demon. Even though the power of blood and qi was immense, it did not pose much of a threat to him. In fact, it could not even compare to the great sage Qi Ying. He could also notice that during the attack and defense, the opponent's huge amount of blood qi would be consumed a little with every exchange. Based on the current situation, if he had enough patience, he would be able to exhaust his opponent to death by punching him one after another. He knew that there must be a reason for this, and a thought arose in his mind. He stopped attacking and allowed the black tortoise to defend him. He took a few steps back and circulated his mana. Flames soared behind him and the demon form gradually condensed. He then opened his eyes and immediately saw the situation inside the ball of blood chi clearly. He couldn't help but exclaim, as expected. For some reason, the soul of the bright radiance demonic forefather was extremely broken. Obviously, it was also because of this that his spiritual intelligence was damaged. He deduced that there was no record of this demonic ancestor being injured in a fight in the annihilating Ming clan, so it was very likely that this was the consequence of trying to break through the pass of heaven and earth. It had fallen into a deep sleep, perhaps slowly recovering. Zhang Yan originally wanted to completely eradicate the opponent to get rid of a big trouble, but after knowing this, he changed his mind. The demonic forefather was the highest realm that a monster could reach in this realm. It contained many secrets that could be explored. If he could capture it and find a way to use it, it was very likely to become a powerful weapon in the hands of the cultivators of the 9 continents. It couldn't be used to refine magic treasures or make pills. However, to do this, he couldn't do it alone. Fortunately, there was the black tortoise beside him, so he could give it a try. After having this thought, he communicated with the divine will of the beast for a moment and decided to make a move. He leaped into the sky and smashed down with his fist. This blow was his full strength. Millions of miles away, the earth shook and the mountains shook, setting off a monstrous tsunami. Under such a huge force, Bright Radiant's demonic forefather could no longer maintain its shape. It exploded into a large ball of blood chi, and even the water turned into a sea of blood. However, in the blink of an eye, it seemed to be gathering again. Zhang Yan let out a loud shout and circulated the magic power in his body. Immediately, a great suction force appeared outside of his body. Bright Radiant's demonic forefather lacked a lot of intelligence, so it was much slower in adapting to the situation. After being pulled by this huge force, the huge blood chi was immediately drawn to where he was. The blood chi that originally spread for tens of thousands of miles was instantly absorbed within a radius of a few dozen miles. However, as the distance became shorter, the speed at which the ancestral dragon gathered together naturally became faster. As it was being dragged, its body, head, wings, and tail appeared one by one. However, at this moment, a muffled rumble came from the sky. The abyssal heavy water fell from the sky. It didn't fall separately, but gathered together to form a long river. When it fell into the blood aura, the waves began to spin. The water was extremely heavy, and as it spun, the ancestral dragon couldn't withstand it. Its body was torn to pieces once again, and even its 12 pairs of wings were shredded into pieces. The black tortoise let out an earth-shattering roar. It stomped on the waves and instantly grew to 1,000 feet in size. It opened its mouth and inhaled deeply. With a rumble, it actually swallowed all the blood chi. Its entire body turned blood red, as if the Luan Ming demonic ancestor was unwilling to be trapped and wanted to escape. Zhang Yan landed at this moment and pressed his hand on its back. Under the joint force of the two, the blood chi was immediately suppressed. After a while, he retracted his hand and said, "Thank you, fellow cultivator." The black tortoise responded and closed its eyes. It laid down motionlessly and even the snake on its back coiled up. This was only a temporary seal. During this period, the divine beast used all its power to suppress the demonic forefather, but it couldn't fight against anyone. Chapter 1272. Zhang Yan flicked his finger and sent a letter to Frost Jade Sea Continent. Then he sat down cross-legged on Xian Wu's back. Xian Wu had to suppress Radiant Light Demon Ancestor with all its strength. It could not return by itself. He also had to watch from the side to prevent Radiant Light Demon Ancestor from escaping. He needed the help of the sect. He held the Dragon Soul Essence. Lightning flashed on his body. The small realm gate opened and kept back the deep abyss heavy water that he had released just now. After doing this, he set up hundreds of formation flags around him. Then, a strand of pure spiritual vigor floated out of his sleeve and floated into the space between his eyebrows. The spiritual vigor of Grotto Heavens was mostly bestowed by sect leader Qin and sect leader Yu, But he was different. He had rank 6 strength path cultivation level. He could go outside the world to collect spiritual vigor. As he gradually refined this strand of vital energy, he could already clearly sense that the day he broke through the 8th barrier wasn't far away. After cultivating here for 3 months, he suddenly felt that there were several auras coming over from far away. He knew that the commotion caused by his battle with Radiant Light Demon Ancestor would attract the attention of some native life forms in Northern Heaven Cold Abyss, but as long as they did not break the formation, there was no need to pay attention to them. Tens of thousands of li away, there were 3 colorful butterflies flying towards him. As they flapped their wings, their figures flickered with spiritual lights. On the butterflies, there were 3 women dressed in colorful clothes. The 2 women on the left and right were dressed as maids. They had fair skin and a sweet appearance. The woman in the middle was in her 20s, she was well-groomed and wore luxurious clothes, but her sleeves were thin like cicada wings. She had green shadow makeup on the corners of her eyes, a tricolored flower was painted on her cheeks, and her long black hair reached her ankles. She looked seductive and seductive. She had a calm expression, but suddenly, she felt an extremely oppressive and tyrannical aura. She was shocked and raised her hand. "Stop." The 3 butterflies stopped. The maid on the left asked, "Lady, what's wrong?" The woman looked around and said with a solemn expression, "The person fighting with Radiant Light Demon Ancestor has not left yet." The maid's eyes lit up and said, "Then he might be injured. The Wan Ming demonic ancestor is the source of the Ming clan's bloodline. With countless divine abilities, I'm afraid no one can defeat it without suffering losses." Zhang Shun thought about it and said, "That's possible." The resting place of the bright light demonic ancestor was not a secret to the major demonic clans in the northern Cold Abyss. Therefore, when she saw the strange phenomenon in the sky that day, she knew that someone had alarmed the demonic ancestor. However, she had some doubts in her heart. The intense collision only lasted for a few hundred breaths before it subsided. No matter how one looked at it, it didn't look like a victor had been decided. The maid said, "Lady, the person who fought with Wan Ming demonic ancestor must be noble among those cultivators from outer space. Since we're going to deal with them, why don't we give them a lotus fruit?" The woman thought for a moment and said, "Since we're here, let's go and take a look. But be careful." Although she was ordered by her clan to try to make friends with these extraterrestrial cultivators. But their understanding of the sex of the 9 continents was limited to rumors. As for the real situation, they had no way to know, so they could only take one step at a time. The woman urged the big butterfly under her and cautiously went in the direction of the aura. The colorful butterfly had the ability to travel through space. After a few hours, it gradually approached the resting place of the bright light demonic ancestor. From afar, a huge half-snake half-turtle monster was lying on the sea. But the strange thing was that its aura was unusually pure. It seemed to be in harmony with nature, without any filthy aura of a demon. And on the back of this thing, there was a dignified Taoist in a black robe. The aura was grand and vast, and the huge qi and blood on his body even soared into the sky. The woman was shocked. She took a few steps forward and bowed, saying, "Yu Cheongju of the Heart Butterfly Tribe greets sir." Zhang Yan opened his eyes and looked into the sky. The woman called herself. She should be from the Heart Butterfly Tribe, which was known as the Myeming Tribe and the Mountain Sun Tribe. In this tribe, there were all monsters that lived on plants. Because the plants they lived on were different, the tribe's name was also different. The Lotus Heart Butterfly Tribe mostly lived on the lotus, so they used the name of the flower as the name of the tribe. After the people of this tribe were born, there would be several transformations. After the 3rd molt, they would naturally be close to the nature of the spirit. Except for the eyes that were slightly different from the eyes of mortals, everything else was similar. The colorful butterfly that the 3 women were riding on was actually the body that they had molted several times. It was just like a human's clothes, which could be molted and reintegrated into the body. As long as one of these shedding clothes still existed, even if they were lost outside, their clansmen would still be able to contribute their essence and blood energy to revive them. The reason why these 3 girls dared to come before him was probably because of this divine ability. After looking for a while, he nodded and said, "So it's a fellow Taoist from the Heart Butterfly tribe, Zhang Yan from the I Chinsong school." The Heart Butterfly tribe had planted spies in the 100 countries of the Eastern Wasteland and the Mountain Sun tribe. Yu Qiongju only received the news recently. These cultivators from beyond the heavens seemed to come from different forces, among which the Qinsong and the Shaoqing tribe were the most powerful. When she heard that Zhang Yan came from the Qinsong school, her expression became even more solemn. She bowed again and said, "Qiongju came here under the orders of the tribe to pay a visit to your tribe. However, halfway through, I saw that the glow-light demonic ancestor who had been sleeping for 10,000 years seemed to have woken up. I was afraid that it would be disadvantageous to my tribe, so I came here to check. If I have disturbed you, please don't blame me." Zhang Yan smiled and said, "I heard from the great sage Crooked Lotus that the Heart Butterfly tribe was forced to flee to the Westlands because of the annihilation of the Ming clan." Yu Qiongju was surprised and said, "Sir, do you have a relationship with the great sage Crooked Lotus?" Zhang Yan said, "The great sage Crooked Lotus was imprisoned by the great sage Qing Pai for 1,000 years. This time, he was also rescued after the annihilation of the Ming clan. Now, he is guarding the mountain gate of the Qinsong school." Yu Qiongju was surprised and happy. She was surprised that the great sage Crooked Lotus had also sought refuge with these cultivators from beyond the heavens. She was happy that the Heart Butterfly tribe had a relationship with this demonic saint. If she could make use of it, perhaps this trip would be smoother than she had imagined. She looked around but did not find the glow-light demonic ancestor. Just when she was about to inquire about it, she suddenly saw dozens of conveyance lights flying in the sky from afar, followed by a large cloud of light and mist. It looked very imposing, and her expression became slightly tense. The two maids beside her also showed vigilance. Zhang Yan said with a smile, "Don't be alarmed, they are the disciples of the Qinsong school. I have ordered them to come here." Only then did Yu Qiongju relax. She looked around and saw that the people coming were all wearing feather clothes and star crowns. They looked extraordinary, and there was no sign of overflowing qi and blood in their bodies, but their qi dynamic was extremely strong. It was obviously another kind of cultivation method, and she was very interested in it. The Heart Butterfly tribe did not have a strong body like the Ming clan, and they did not have the Shanyang clan's transformation method. Usually, only when dozens or hundreds of tribesmen worked together could they have the ability to fight. If she could learn some of this cultivation method, she might be able to make up for what she lacked. Zhou Xian descended from the cloud and came to the front of Zhang Yan. He bowed and said, "Uncle Master, I have transferred 160 tribesmen from the Yun clan. I believe that with their combined strength, we can send Uncle Master and Xian Wuzhenren back together." Zhang Yan stood up and said, 160 cloud whales should be enough. Go and take care of them, we can start the cultivation method now." Zhou Xian responded and went to make the arrangements. The 60 cloud whales came to the side of Xian Wu and spat out clouds of mist from their mouths. The mist quickly merged together. Zhang Yan turned his gaze and said to Yu Qiongju, "Why don't you return to Frost Jade Ocean continent with us?" Yu Qiongju bowed and said, "Thank you, sir." At this moment, she hesitated and finally couldn't help but ask, "Sir, may I ask, where did Huan Ming demonic ancestor go?" Zhang Yan said indifferently, "Huan Ming demonic ancestor no longer exists in this world." When he finished, he shook his robe and stepped into the mist. Even though Yu Qiongju was mentally prepared, she couldn't help but be shocked when she suddenly heard the news. She only came back to her senses when the maidservant came up and pulled the corner of her robe. She looked at the mist in front of her and her eyes lit up. She said, "Let's go." After everyone entered the mist, the hundreds of cloud whales performed the teleportation technique at the same time. Everyone only felt a flash in front of their eyes and they appeared above Frost Jade Ocean continent. Zhang Yan ordered Zhou Xian, "Just now, those three are the envoys from Heart Butterfly tribe. This tribe might be able to be allies. You have to treat them well." Zhou Xian bowed and said, "Yes, martial nephew." Zhang Yan walked out and with a change of heart, he turned into a clear light and floated in the sky. When he arrived in front of Du Zhen Hall, he saw Tao Zhenhong waiting there and asked, What's the matter, sect leader Tao? Tao Zhenhong bowed and said, I heard that you captured a demonic ancestor, so I specially came here to ask for some qi and blood of the demonic ancestor. Zhang Yan changed his mind and asked, Is it to refine that ferocious creature? Tao Zhenren said, That's right. Most of the precious materials used now are the corpses of demons. Perhaps it's like the severed demon, lacking in vitality. However, if we obtain the demonic ancestor's qi and blood, not only can we make up for this deficiency, we might even be able to try to refine something else. Having said that, he handed over a scroll. Please take a look, perfected one. Zhang Yan took the scroll and unfurled it. On it was a strange, round object without a head or tail, with 4 limbs on the ground. Its entire body was filled with potholes, as though it was wearing a layer of toad clothing. It was very ugly, so he asked, What is this? Tao Zhenren said, This item is called Tai Sak. This painting was obtained from the Nanhua sect, which was passed down from the ancient Xianyu Palace in the West Continent. Back then, there was an ambitious sect leader who wanted to fuse the blood of billions of demons in the world into one place to create an unprecedented ferocious demon. This item is not only used for battle, but it can also be used to give birth to a demonic creature that is compatible with their own blood essence. Zhang Yan pondered for a moment and said, Such a bold idea. If it can really be done, just this item alone is enough to support a large sect. Tao Zhenren nodded in agreement and said in a slightly regretful tone, It's a pity that the roots were dug up and the Xianyu Palace suffered a calamity. After the West Continent went east, it was replaced by the Nanhua sect. The people who came later no longer had such ambition and boldness. Zhang Yan thought for a moment and said, However, according to fellow Taoist Tao, even if you obtain the demonic ancestor's qi and blood, it will probably be difficult to refine this item. Tao Zhenren cupped his hands and said, I know my limits. I'm currently lacking in cultivation. The techniques of the predecessors are not something I can match. However, I can learn a thing or two from it and refine another item. If I succeed, the cultivators of the 9 continents might be able to benefit from it. Chapter 1273. After receiving Zhou Xian's guidance, Yang Yansheng took the token and rowed the boat on the sea. Compared to the outer sea, cold Jade Ocean province's waves were relatively gentle, but there were huge waves from time to time. Fortunately, his boat was not an ordinary object. There were restrictions on the boat, so it did not capsize. After sailing for 6 months, he finally saw an island with a white bird. The token in his pocket trembled, and he knew that this was the place to become his disciple. He could not help but be excited and rowed the boat with all his might. But after a while, he realized that no matter how he rowed the boat, he could not go any further. The huge boat kept spinning on the sea. When he came over, the cultivator in green gave him a jade scroll. It was not some profound technique, but some common knowledge about Taoist cultivators. He guessed that he had encountered the rumored restriction formation. Just as he was thinking of a way, a voice sounded above his head, Why did this Taoist brother cross the sea? He looked up and saw a beautiful girl riding on a white bird, looking at him curiously. He quickly cupped his hands and said, I am Yang Yansheng. I have received permission from Spiritual Master Zhou to come here and become your disciple. Spiritual Master Zhou? Become your disciple? That young girl felt a bit confused. Although the sects also brought some people from the 9 continents over, at this time, most of them were still in the small world and hadn't been released. Thus, she looked at him seriously and asked, Oh, could it be that Tao brother isn't a creature of this world? Yang Yansheng could not hide his identity, so he answered truthfully, Yes. The young girl's interest was piqued. She asked, Then are you a demon or a strange spirit monster? Yang Yansheng hesitated and said, I should be a monster. Is there a problem? The girl giggled and said, Senior brother is worrying too much. My Clear Feather sect has many cultivators of the different races. Yang Yansheng heaved a sigh of relief and thought, So the sect that Spiritual Master Zhou wants me to join is Clear Feather sect? The girl exclaimed and said, The Spiritual Master Zhou that Senior brother is talking about is he Zhou Xian from Qinsong School? Yang Yanxing nodded and said, that is his name. The young girl's expression turned serious and said, so it was Zhenren Zhou who recommended Xixiang to come here. Little sister is Yu Xian. After you enter the sect, I might need you to take care of me in the future. Yang Yanxing hurriedly said, senior sister Yu is too serious. Yu Xian waved her hand, and a ray of light shone down, signaling him to stand up. She said, Dao brother, you don't know the way, so I'll bring you along. Yang Yanxing walked onto the mysterious light and felt as if he was standing on a cloud. Then, he was supported by the light and landed on the back of the white bird. He watched as the mystic light was absorbed into the girl's body. A look of envy appeared in his eyes. In the Shanyang clan, only the nobles of the upper 6 clans could acquire such a flying divine ability by refining their blood and qi. As for the lower 36 clans that he came from, they could only acquire some inferior divine abilities that were similar to turning stone into mud. At this moment, he suddenly thought of a question and asked, may I ask senior martial sister Yu, what is the cultivation level of your sect leader? The young girl revealed a proud expression and said, our clear feather sect's ancestral master Tao is the heaven abode immortal. Yang Yanxing's heart shook, and at the same time, a look of anticipation appeared on his face. He learned from the Jade Scroll. Many sects were founded by core formation cultivators or heaven abode Yuanine cultivators. He originally thought that it was good enough for a foreign alien like him to be able to join such a sect. He didn't expect that he would join a sect founded by a heaven abode immortal. From the description of the records, such a person might be much stronger than a demon saint, and he had a sect that the heaven abode immortal was in. Although he knew that he didn't have the right to be picky, as a young man, he naturally had more thoughts in his mind. The two of them rode on the white bird and soon arrived on the island. At this moment, the token in the bag suddenly shook, and it leaped out by itself, flying toward a mountain peak high up on the island. After a while, a deep voice came down. Xian heir, bring him to the mountain peak to see me. Yu Xian replied and said, yes, master. She raised her hand and lightly clapped. The white bird chirped happily and flew toward the mountain peak. The island wasn't big, and after a while, they stopped in front of an abode. Yang Yanxing leaped down from the bird's body. There was a Taoist child standing beside the abode's door. The child smiled at him in a friendly manner and cupped his hands. Senior martial brother, the heaven abode immortal is waiting for you in the abode. Yang Yanxing thanked him and walked inside with some apprehension. After about 10 steps, the inside of the abode gradually became spacious. After going around a stone screen, he saw a Taoist in his 50s sitting on a stone couch. In front of him was the token that had flown away. He knew that this should be his teacher, so he hurriedly learned the customs of the 9 continents and went forward to kowtow. Yang Yanxing greets teacher. The Taoist sized him up and said with a kind expression, get up. I don't like common etiquette. In the future, when we talk to each other, there's no need to be so formal. Yang Yanxing's heart was filled with excitement and joy. He said yes, kowtowed again and stood up. The Taoist nodded and said, my name is Chen Yitsong, and I'm the 17th disciple of Patriarch Tao. I only have one disciple, and just now, the one who brought you here is your eldest martial sister. She's only 1 or 2 years older than you. From now on, you'll cultivate here and learn from her. Before Tao Zhenhong formed the heavenly abode, he had 4 disciples. Even though their aptitudes weren't bad, when Clear Feather Sect was first established, external objects were too scarce. 3 of them died of old age, and now only the 4th disciple, Yang Lin, was still alive. However, in the next few hundred years, he had taken in another 10 disciples, and Chen Yitsong had become his disciple about 400 years ago. Even though Clear Feather Sect hadn't chosen a location, as a Yuanine cultivator, he had his own island as a place to cultivate. However, he wasn't like his senior martial brothers who were indifferent and didn't compete with others. Other than his hobby of raising strange birds and beasts, he didn't have any hobbies and rarely interacted with his fellow disciples. This time, When Zhou Xian recommended this disciple of a different race to be his disciple, he was only slightly surprised before agreeing to it. He didn't even ask for the reason. Yang Yanxing said, "Little disciple will definitely work hard to cultivate. I won't disappoint you." Chen Yizong shook his head and said, "Cultivation is your own business. I'll teach you whatever you want to learn. Even if you can't cultivate it, I won't blame you." He pondered for a moment and said, "Since you're my disciple, you should change your name. Your surname is the fire of the sun and moon, but it's too rash and violent. It doesn't leave any room for retreat. As the saying goes, a long time of prosperity leads to decline. It's not suitable for us cultivators. I'll go to the fire to get wood, and change the dead to give birth to new life. Let's change your surname to Yang." Yang Yanxing was overjoyed. "Many thanks, Master. The name Yanxing was casually given to me by a noble. Could you please change it as well?" Chen Yizong stroked his beard and said, "You're a sprite of the mountain and sea realm, and have a Tao of illusion. However, now that you're my disciple, you don't need to worry about your past identity. Illusions are real. Master hopes that you won't betray your original heart, and will walk the righteous Tao. I'll give you a name. How about Yanzhen?" Yanzhen. Yang Yanzhen? After repeating his name twice, the young man felt as if he had been reborn. He dropped to his knees and kowtowed. "Many thanks, Master, for bestowing a name upon me." But then he remembered that his master had taken care of him just now, so he quickly rose to his feet. Chen Yizong looked at him and said, "Master can see that your qi and blood are strong, but I don't know how to use it. I also don't know how to circulate and refine qi. Take a look at this technique. If you don't understand anything, you can ask Master." He produced a jade slip, which Yang Yanzhen respectfully accepted. He clutched it tightly in his hand, as if he were afraid of losing it. Seeing that Chen Yizong had closed his eyes and wasn't saying anything, he knew he had to leave. Bowing, he carefully left. When he came outside, he saw Ding Xian standing there in an apricot yellow dress. She pursed her lips into a smile and said, "Should I call you Junior Martial Brother now?" Yang Yanzhen clasped his hands and said, "Greetings, elder sister." Ding Xian giggled and said, "Even though Master's cultivation is one of the best under founding Master's tutelage, there are too few disciples. I'm the only one. I don't even have anyone to discuss with. Now that Junior Brother is here, it'll be a little more lively." As she spoke, she waved her hand again. "Junior Brother, come with me. I'll take you to get the medicinal pills you need for cultivation." He led Yang Yanzhen to a bluestone paved mountain path. After walking for 2 to 3 miles, they arrived in front of a cave. He waved a talisman in his hand and warned, "There are a few spirit lizards guarding the cave. Junior Brother, if you don't have the talisman, don't go in. Be careful, they might eat you." Yang Yanzhen nodded obediently. Ding Xian led him inside. The cave was quite deep, and the paths were extremely complicated. It seemed to contain some kind of formation. After walking for about an hour, the two of them came to a cave that was 10 feet wide. Ding Xian pointed at the pool of water in the middle that was glowing with light and said, "This is the Jade Elixir Essence Pool. Junior Brother, if you cultivate diligently, you can come here to open your meridians in 1 or 2 years." She walked to the side and took down 3 items from the rack. They were a set of clothes, a sleeve pouch, and a beast ambushing collar. She handed them to him and said, "Junior Brother, keep them well. These clothes are the clothing of my clear feather sect. If you don't like to wear them, you can throw them aside. There are half a load of water and food in the sleeve pouch. You can use it when you're in seclusion. You can order the servants to prepare your daily meals. The beast ambushing collar can catch birds and beasts. This island is surrounded by boundless seawater. If you go out, you can choose a bird from this collar as your mount. As for how to use it, I'll teach you later." After that, she explained the rules and taboos of the sect in detail. Yang Yanzhen listened very seriously. It was not easy to come by a cultivation opportunity. He didn't want to lose the big for the small, so he memorized everything in his heart. As they spoke, a long dragon roar came from outside the island, and a voice came. "Is fellow Taoist Chen here?" Ding Xian said in surprise, It's Jade Feather Pavilion's spiritual master Han. Yang Yanjin asked, is Jade Feather Pavilion a big sect? Ding Xian shook her head and said, even though Jade Feather Pavilion isn't a big sect, spiritual master Han is the disciple of Qinsong School's Zhang Shangjin. When she said that, her beautiful eyes turned and revealed a hint of slyness. She grabbed his hand and said, let's go, junior brother. You just happen to lack a guardian spirit beast. This spiritual Master Han's cave abode has many rare birds and beasts. Since Master has accepted you as a disciple, and spiritual Master Han is a good friend of his, you have to give him a greeting gift. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.